Good morning, Brett.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thanks for making time for me, and thanks for coming on Kathmandu podcast. You're the second guest on this show, and thanks for being here.
Well, I'm honored, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, first I really found out about you was through Lex Friedman's podcast, and man, that was a long podcast for sure. But it did go by pretty fast. 4 hours just went by pretty fast, and I was just fascinated about the way, how you talked about your life and what you've been through. And I think it's certainly worth sharing that to a lot more people. That way, they understand how, a former cyber criminal operated and what we can learn from some of the stuff that has happened on the online space. So, Brett, why don't you talk about there's so much to talk about, right? And could you kind of give us a little insight on, where you grew up? Like, I think you were in Kentucky, and then how was your early life? And then, let's kind of talk about it a little bit.
So how was my early life? Well, you watched the Lex Friedman podcast, and it's over the years. I've done several podcasts. I speak for a living, and over the years, it's gotten to the point where a lot of that story is kind of rote. It's verbatim almost. The truth is that my life, my childhood was, to me, my childhood was normal. If you don't see anything else, whatever you're growing up in is the norm at that point. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. For those who don't know, Eastern Kentucky is almost like a third world country in the United States. I'm in the heart of coal country, where it used to be that the economy was driven by coal miners. People would go inside of a mountain and extract coal and sell it, or they would strip mine, they would uncover the coal and take it out like that. As time went on, of course, the coal industry dies. And there was a New York Times article in the early 1980s that talked about how the economy of Eastern Kentucky was the yard sale economy. People selling whatever they could to make a living. That's certainly part of the economy now. But another part of the economy is the fraud economy. You've got that black market economy, people who are looking to defraud the government, to get on, quote unquote, the draw, that monthly paycheck from the government. My mom was kind of like that. She's still alive. As far as I know, she's still alive. She would do whatever she could to get over on somebody. Now, this is a woman. At one point, she steals a 108,000-pound Caterpillar D9 bulldozer, trams it down the highway. Another point, she takes a slip and fall in a convenience store, tries to sue the owner. That's my mom. We had a neighbor that she acted as a pimp for. That's my mom. And it was always something. I remember when I was a child that her and my grandmother, they would go around to these little trailer parks, and they would buy this costume jewelry, and they would sell it as real jewelry. So that's the type of environment that I grew up in. Was that my dad was in the military. He was a captain in the United States Army, helicopter pilot, and my dad died last October. My dad was the guy who didn't have a backbone. Just truthfully speaking, he didn't really have any drive to do anything. Didn't really have the gumption to stand up to my mom. He was always scared of her leaving. So if she wanted to commit a crime, he would, co-sign on to it. If she wanted to abuse someone, the man wouldn't step in the way. And that's one of the problems that I'm not the only child. Got a sister that's a year older than me. I'm a year younger. I'm 55, be 55 in 2 days. She's a year younger. Denise, looking at her childhood, I recorded a podcast with her several years ago, and she said that she always expected or always looked for someone to come in and save me and her. And my immediate response at that point was, I knew that no one was ever going to do that. And if you look at both of our trajectories in life, I think that it absolutely determines those trajectories. She doesn't live a life of crime. She goes off to be a parent, a teacher, a good citizen overall. But Denise has a lot of anger issues.
Sure.
She absolutely does to this day. Me, I go off into that life of crime. Now, I don't have anger issues. I'm this jovial guy, kind of outgoing, friendly, but certainly that life of crime, because I at the end of the day, I believe that, and I've talked about this in the past, my crime, I think I chose a life of crime because it allowed me to dictate every single thing that I was able to do. I didn't have to rely on anyone else and depend on anyone else. It was just me doing it all the way through. And while that's working, that works. As long as everything's going okay, you can live with that fallacy, that falsehood. It's when you hit rock bottom that you find out that, no man's an island, that it's not just you, that you have to depend on other people. And it took me a long time in my life to understand that about things. So, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and I tell people this. My life of crime began when I was around 10 years old. My mom had left my dad. We were in Panama City, Florida. She leaves the man. Me and Denise, she loads us up in a vehicle. We go back to Hazard, Kentucky. And my mom used to leave me and my sister at home for days at a time. We lived underneath of our grandparents. My grandfather had elevated his house, and underneath of it, he had converted the underneath to apartments. And we lived in one of those apartments. My mom used to leave me and my sister there for days at a time, and she'd go out and party, was what she was doing. Sometimes she'd take me and Denise with her, and she'd leave us in the car. We'd wait in the living room as she partied in the bedroom. But most of the time, she just left us at home. And what happens is we didn't have any food in the house. We really couldn't go upstairs and ask for anything to eat because they would make comments. My grandfather and grandmom would make comments about it and degrade us. So we didn't want to do that. And one day Denise walks in the house and she's got this pack of pork chops in her hand. And I'm like, where did you get that? And she's like, well, I stole them. It's like, well, show me how you did that. And she takes me over. She's around 9 years old. She takes me over to A&P, and she shows me how she's stuffing food down her pants. And I'm like, well, shit, that's the best idea ever right there. So we start stealing food, and the way that escalates, we get to where we're wanting a sandwich. And you can't stuff a loaf of bread down your pants. So that same shopping plaza had a Kmart in it. And I looked at my sister, and I was like, let me see what I can do. So I walked into Kmart and got a hoodie off the rack, took the tags off of it, put it on, wore it outside, got outside with it. And the way you steal bread when you're 10 years old is you take that loaf of bread, you stuff it down the sleeve of the hoodie, throw the hoodie over top of your back, and you walk out with it. And that's how things escalated. Well, it turns out, of course, that Kmart's got a hell of a lot more than just hoodies. And you can do a hell of a lot more with that hoodie than stuff bread in it. So we started to steal everything in the world, books, games, jewelry, music, toys, everything. And Mom took her a while to notice everything, So finally she notices that in television that I'm playing, all the new video games and all that stuff, asks where it came from. I stand up. Well, we found it. She's like, no, you didn't find that. My sister Denise, she stands up. And that girl doesn't lie at all. She stands up, and you can tell she's kind of prideful about it. She's kind of pissed off about it. We stole it. Right. And my mom showed me how you did that. She was that opportunist. And so she starts running us as these little shoplifters. And she calls her mom to join us as well. So we used to take these road trips, shoplifting at J.C. Penney's. I'd go to the bookstore and steal books. And that's where my life of crime begins. And
back in the day, when you would go into, let's say, these J.C. Penney's and these places, was there, enough security? Like you had these tags, and was like technology as good as maybe it is today in some sense?
No, you didn't have the RFID tags or anything like that, or the the magnetic things that you have to walk through. You didn't have anything like that. You had people on the floor. And you may have had some cameras on the floor as well. But that was it. It was very easy to do that. And the thing is when you're children, security doesn't pay attention to children. Security doesn't pay attention to parents who have children. They're not expecting those people to steal. But if you're running that as shoplifting, that's a very effective way to shoplift because no one's paying attention to you. Now, what happens is we took this road trip to Johnson City, Bristol, Kingsport area. This mall was called the Fort Henry Thomas Mall, and it had J.C. Penney's there. So it was me, my sister, grandmother, and my mom drove over there. They were going into J.C. Penney's to steal clothes and jewelry. I was going over to B. Dalton to steal books, and we were supposed to meet back at this. We had a Chevy S10 Blazer. Supposed to meet back at that like at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So I go over and steal my books and come back to the Blazer. Nobody's there. I'm like, okay. So I wait a while, and I'm like, well, shit, man. I know they're in J.C. Penney's, and I'm like, well, I can't take these books in there because I don't have them in a bag or anything else like that. So I kind of try to hide the books underneath the Blazer. Walk into J.C. Penney's, and as I walking in the entryway there's two security guards, and I hear my name over one of their walkie-talkies as I'm going in. I'm like, hey, wait a second, Brett Johnson. And they're like, yeah. I was like, that's me. And they're like, that's you? And I'm like, yeah, come with us. So they lead me to the security room where my mom and grandmother are huddled in one corner, hugging each other, crying. We've never done this before. We're so sorry, blah, 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 blah. My sister Denise is as far away from them as she can possibly get, just pissed off, angry, not crying, not saying a word, anything else like that. They'd gotten caught for shoplifting. They didn't go to jail. The reason they didn't go to jail that day, my mom is busy telling the security people, oh, what about the children? What are you going to do? I gotta be able to take care of my kids. So they let them bond out ROR, on recognizance, head back home. And like a month, 2 months later, they show up for court, get probation. That kills their aspirations at shoplifting geniuses at that point. Me, it didn't kill my aspirations at all. I kept right on going. Now, one of the things that you find out as a criminal, and I'm no different on that, is when you get caught, if the consequences are not too high, the only thing that does is that teaches you, hey, I need to change this attack vector all of a sudden, or the crime. I got caught like this, I'll fix that and keep on going. That's the only thing that happened with me. And that happens throughout my criminal career. Cops would show up at something. I would understand, okay, they caught me doing this. How do I need to change this so I'm not caught the next time? And you continue to learn, adapt, and become better at being a criminal. Is the only thing that happens.
Because the consequences of your crime is not, it's not as significant, at least, or you don't think that you're not going to a jail for like a long time where you have like ways to get out, right?
So you think about it, and I've had this happen before. I'd ripped a lady off on a Beanie Baby. Okay, so one of the stories that I tell is, and it's really one of the first online crimes I committed is I was in Lexington, Kentucky. I'd gotten married. I was doing these little street scams and all that. Like I'd set up my own fake charity to rip people off, and I got caught with that. So after I got caught with that, and I actually did 3 months in jail for that one. But after I did that, come back out and find the internet. And I'm like, I like the internet. I was looking for ways to make money on it. Didn't know how until I found eBay, and man, I liked eBay a lot. Didn't know how to make money on eBay. And Bill O'Reilly at that point in time, he was hosting Inside Edition. They had a show that night on Beanie Babies and profiling this one called Peanut, the Royal Blue Elephant, selling for $1,500. I'm sitting there watching it like, well, shit, I need to find me a Peanut. Well, idiot here, I was naive. I thought, well, I'm in Kentucky. There's got to be one in a bin somewhere. So I go around to all the Hallmark stores the next day trying to find a little Peanut. Can't find him. Takes me about 3 hours of shopping around to figure out, well, no, idiot. He's on eBay for $1,500. He's not in a bin someplace. But what I did was they had these little gray ones for $8. The exact same little elephant. The tag was different. The color was different. I'm sitting there going, okay, $8. Buy one for $8. stop by Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue dye, try to dye the little guy, figure out pretty quickly, well, look, he's made out of polyester. They don't hold dye very well. First of all, you got to keep them dunked in there. You get them out, all the dye bleeds off. They look like they've got the mange. And I ripped a lady off of $1,500. And all this, the interesting thing about this is that all of this fraud, this crime, everything builds on each other. I learned from my mom and my grandmother that concept of how do you establish trust with that potential victim. All right. So in order for me to defraud you, either as a company or an individual, I have to establish trust with that potential victim. If I can't get you to trust me, you're not going to give me what I want you to give me. So how do you do that? Well, with a company, you do that with stolen credentials or stolen identities or things like that. With an individual, it's a little bit different. With this lady that I ripped off $1,500 on eBay, the way I did that is I found a picture of a real one, a real peanut online, posted it. She thought I had the real thing. She wins the bid. All right. Now, establishing trust with her, certainly it was the picture. It was also the platform, though. That platform of eBay, it was trusted at that point in time. Nobody thought that anyone was going to rip anyone off at that point in time. Right. So she trusted the platform. She trusted the picture. Then once she wins the bid, she starts to trust me because I'm a very good social engineer. I'm a very good liar. All right. So I tell her, I'm like, hey, you win the bid. Congratulations. By the way, we've never done any business before. I don't know if I can trust you. What I need you to do, go down to the Postal Service, pick up a couple of money orders. They're issued by the U.S. government. They protect you. They protect me. Send me that. I'll send you your animal. So all that establishes trust with that potential victim. Yeah. She sends me the money orders. I send her this animal in the mail. Get this phone call immediately because I was a dumbass. I did all this under my own name at that point in time. Get this phone call. This is not what I ordered. My response was, lady, you ordered a blue elephant. I sent you a blue-ish elephant and ripped her off at $1,500. And one of the things that you find out online, it's not just online, it's people as a whole. You delay someone. You just keep putting them off. A lot of them, they get exasperated. They throw their hands in the air. They walk away. They give up. And they don't report to law enforcement because they don't think the cops are going to do anything. And let's be honest, cops are so overburdened with crime these days, right. They're not going to do anything a lot of the times. They're going to prioritize, they triage fraud and crime. So as long as you stay under a certain dollar amount, they're not going to do anything. And that's typically what happened with me is, the elephant eBay thing, I didn't even get a visit from law enforcement on that. What happens is because I get away with it, I keep on going, and I get better at it. Like I took a lot of inspiration from Inside Edition. So Bill O'Reilly on another night was talking about autographed baseballs, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. I'm sitting there going, autographed baseballs, I could do that. So the next day I skip class again, go down to the sports store, buy a case of baseballs, stop by that same damn Kroger on the way home, pick up a black Sharpie, go home, try to start signing baseballs. Figure out pretty quickly, well, hey, that's a round object. Trying to, forge a signature on that doesn't look very good. So what I need to do is create my own certificates of authenticity. So I printed those off all of a sudden. Sold them all on eBay. Get a knock at the door on that one. We were living off campus. I was going to University of Kentucky for English Lit. My wife at the time was going for a music performance. And it was 7, 8 o'clock at night. And, that cop knock, that bam, 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 bam. So knock at the door. I'm like, I know what the hell that is. So I stand up. Susan, my wife at the time, she doesn't say a word. I stand up, answer the door. There's Sergeant Pat Tingle and some detective from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. Are you Brett Johnson? I was like, yes. Can we come in and talk to you? I was like, absolutely. So they walk in. Meanwhile, my wife, not saying a word, just dead silent. She stands up at this point, just looking at me. And he was like, Tingle's like, and I got to know him pretty well. He was like, we'd like to talk to you about some baseball. So I was like, absolutely. He's like, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. I was like, yes, sir. Signed. Yes, sir. With certificates of authenticity. Yes, sir. Well, where'd you get them? I bought them off eBay. You bought them off eBay. Yes, sir. Mr. Johnson, we have a sample of their actual autographs down at the station. That doesn't look anything like that. And I was like, huh. Well, it comes with certificates of authenticity. He was like, well, Mr. Johnson, we think you printed off those certificates. No, sir. Mr. Johnson, you're going to give these people their money back or we're going to put you in jail. Do you understand? Yes, sir. So they leave. Meanwhile, my wife has not said a damn thing. I finally look over and I was like, what? And she's like, you son of a bitch. That's why you bought those goddamn baseballs. And I was like, yeah. So, but what you find out is they didn't put me in jail. They didn't get a warrant for me. So how do you fix that problem? Well, the first lesson you learn is, hey, the only money you have to refund are those who have complained to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. The other ones you don't. Then how do you fix it from there? Well, what I learned is, well, the first lesson of cybercrime, of fraud in general, should be don't do this stuff under your own name. Do it under someone else's name. So that's where this advent of Shadow Crew ultimately comes into play. I was looking for, I got to where I understood that, hey, need a fake driver's license, set up some drop accounts with that fake driver's license, open up a bank account with that driver's license, launder the money through that. Had no idea where to get a fake driver's license. So I was at university, still didn't know where to get a fake ID. Got online, started looking around, spent, at that point in time you had IRC, Internet Relay Chat, was where you would go to try to find
What year is this?
Geez, this is 96, 97 at this point. And so I got on IRC, could not find anything. Finally, I thought I found a guy. He went by the screen name of Fake ID Man. I was like, well, that's got to be legitimate.
That sounds legit.
Yeah, had a website, everything else. So I sent him $200, sent him my picture. The dude rips me off. Yeah, no shit, he rips me off. Well, I got pissed because it's no fun being a victim. And still needed the driver's license. So I started I kept looking and looking, and I found this website called Counterfeit Library. And it just opened up, and it was a degree mill is what it was. They sold fake degrees and certificates. They had a forum attached to it that no one was using. I mean, there were 5 or 6 members total. So I started getting on there, and the only thing I would do is just bitch every day, complain about being ripped off. And about the same time, these 2 other guys found the forum as well. Went by the screen name of Mr. X and then Beelzebub. And we became buddies, was what happened. And ultimately what happens is Beelzebub, he was from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He gets me on ICQ one of these days, and he messages me, and he's like, I went by the screen name of Gollum Fun. And he was like, Gollum, I can make you a fake ID. And I was like, well, man, do it. He's like, nope, I'm going to charge you for it. And I was like, yeah, like hell you are. Yeah. He's like, no, man. He's like, you need to understand, if you're going to do this stuff online, you have to be able to trust people. So I'm going to charge you $200. Well, by this point in time, I've become friends with the people who actually own Counterfeit Library. And they know me pretty damn well. And they like me. That's even better. So I'm like, okay. I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you $200. That way, when you rip me off, I'm going to have your ass banned from here. And he was like, bet. I was like, okay. So I sent him $200, sent him my picture. About 3 weeks later, I get this ID in the mail. A guy named Steven Schwecke, real guy. He worked for, I think he still works for ADP Payroll. One of the podcasts I was on, they interviewed the guy about it. And caused him a lot of hell. But I got that ID in, and I thought it was the prettiest damn thing in the world. So I used it to cash out checks, open up bank accounts, commit all tons of fraud on that. What happens is I had no real, other than eBay fraud at that point in time, I really didn't understand driver's licenses or credit cards or anything else like that. So Beelzebub was making a fake ID. Mr. X made a very competent fake Social Security card. You put both those together and you've got the means that you need to set up bank accounts and commit a lot of fraud. The idea is that since I did not manufacture anything, that I could become the reviewer of these products and any other product that came in there, learn how to use them, and increase my knowledge and give legitimacy to this entire thing that we were trying to build at that point in time. So that's what I did. Beelzebub made the IDs. Mr. X made the Social Security cards. I was the reviewer of any product or service that came in. And it became this almost this field of dreams. So if you think about it, and I've talked about this several times in the past, online fraud or online crime, three things have to take place for that to be successful. You have to commit a crime. You have to gather data. That's the stolen credentials, the identities, any tool that you need to commit that crime, like RDPs or proxies or anything like that. You gather the data. You then use that to commit the crime. And then finally, you have to be able to cash that crime out. Those are the three main necessities of successfully committing crime online. The problem with that is that one single person can't do that. He can do one, sometimes two, but all three, no. So you have to network with people who are good in those areas where you are not. All right? Before Counterfeit Library, there are three sites: Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, Carter Planet. Mm-hmm. Before those three sites come into play, the only avenue you had to network with other criminals was IRC. This rolling chat board. You had no idea who the hell you were talking to, if they knew what they were talking about, if they had a product or service, if it worked, or if they were just going to rip you off because everyone there was a crook. So how do you fix that problem? Well, ultimately, Shadow Crew fixes that. Shadow Crew gave a trust mechanism for criminals to use. Now you have this large communication channel, forum-type structure, where individuals from different time zones could reference conversations days, weeks, months old, take part in those conversations, learn from those conversations. On the darknet, that's still the way it is today. You look at someone's screen name on the dark web. Mm-hmm. That screen name is that person's brand. They use that across multiple platforms, period. So you know by looking at someone's screen name what the history of that individual is.
And that's still today.
That's still today. Now, that's different on Telegram, all right? But on the dark web, on that traditional concrete type of dark web, that's the way it works. You know by looking at someone's screen name what the history of that individual is. Can you trust them? What's their skill level? Can you network with them? Can you talk to them?
Before you get into more of that, Brett, so back in the day, see, like now you have a lot of platforms. You know, you just go online. There's a lot of, you have Reddits and you have like all these different platforms. Back in the day, how would you, let's say, for example, if you like talking about Shadow Crew, how would you, let's say, for example, it's 1996 or whatever date it is, and then I'm interested in committing like some of these cyber crimes, and I'm looking to network with people. How are people finding about like where to go? Like, what was the means to get to that?
So at that point in time, it was word of mouth. So Counterfeit Library is where it starts. All right. Now, that was the only game in town. There were no other criminal forums at that point in time at all. It was Counterfeit Library, period. Okay. So you had people on IRC that were looking to purchase these things, that were looking for fake IDs, that were looking for identities, that were looking to get tutorials on fraud. Like I taught people how to defraud others on eBay, okay? So you had all that was going on IRC, but the problem was you had no trust mechanism there. You did not know if you were going to get ripped off or not, and more often than not, much like on Telegram, you are going to get ripped off than not, okay? So once you have this type of forum there where it's more concrete, you had people on IRC that were saying, "Hey, have you been over to Counterfeit Library?" Well, it looks like they know what they're doing and they're not ripping people off. So then more people come. As more people come, that word of mouth starts to spread, not just on IRC, but on other forums as well that are out there. Okay, so that word of mouth is what matters. We got to the point that we were ranked on Alexa. We were getting like 1 million hits a day at one point. All right, on Shadow Crew ultimately, but. So that's how it begins, is that almost field of dreams. If you build it, they will come, all right? And that's exactly what happens. We didn't – none of us that were on Counterfeit Library and then Shadow Crew, even Carter Planet, I don't think that any of us really understood the appetite for that type of website or platform that was out there. What we looked at is we had problems that we were trying to overcome, and how do you fix the problems that we were experiencing? And come to find out, those problems are widespread across crime online. But so yeah, Shadow Crew. What we Counterfeit Library was the first forum and marketplace of its type. All right, that precursor of the dark web. Guy named Dmitry Golubov, Ukrainian at that point, he saw that what we were doing with Counterfeit Library. He was a spammer, and he was getting all these credit card details. And he had this idea of, I wonder if people will buy stolen credit cards. Well, they will. So he picks up his phone, He calls his buddies, word of mouth again. They call their buddies. They end up having a physical conference in Odessa. 150 of these criminals show up. And at that point in time, and it's changed in Ukraine from then to now. At that point in time, you had a lot of technically savvy people that simply were unemployed, and they needed to eat. So they had this conference, and they were like, hey, we can do this website called Carter Planet, which is the genesis of all modern credit card theft as we know it today. So at that point in time, throughout that eastern bloc of Europe, fraud had become so prolific in that area that all cards were shut down. If you were even the legitimate card holders, you had problems using your credit cards in that part of Europe at that point in time. And it goes back to these three necessities of cybercrime: gathering data, committing crime, cashing out. So certainly the Ukrainians, they had all the data. They were able to commit the crime, but their ability to cash out had been shut down at that point. So what happens is, Carter Planet's out there. They weren't able to cash out. They needed the ability to do that. We were running Counterfeit Library, so I started to see, one day this guy named Script comes over to Counterfeit Library. And he was like, hey, I've got the ability to update billing information on credit cards. You give me a drop address, you give me a phone number, wait 5 business days, order whatever the hell you want to. We had never seen that before in the United States, all right? And no one on that forum had ever seen that either. So because of we realized what it could do, and we distrusted it. So a lot of the members, and I was the only reviewer at that point, every single product and service went through me. All right, if I said it was good, people made money. If I said stay away from it, people went broke. But the members of Counterfeit Library at that point, they were like, this guy's got to be a cop. He's setting us up so we get busted, he get arrested. Don't trust him. So that went on for about a week. After a week, I'm like, well, shit, I got to review this son of a bitch. So I get him on ICQ. That's how we used to communicate, was ICQ.
What was the ICQ again?
Do what?
The ICQ?
ICQ is just a messaging platform. I think it's still around. But got him on ICQ, sent him a message, and I was like, hey, man, you have to be reviewed in order to sell your service on Counterfeit Library. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? So I explained it to him. He's like, okay, you review me. I was like, yeah, that's the idea. So I gave him an address, phone number, waited 5 business days, tried to place an order with Dell. Failed, declined. Got back on ICQ. Hey, man, didn't work. He's like, well, give me one more chance. I was like, look, I'll give you one more chance. At the end of that, that's your ass if it doesn't work. He's like, one more chance is all I need. I was like, okay. Give him another address, another phone number, waiting 5 more business days. Placed an order. At that point in time, there was a company called Thompson's Computer Warehouse. Placed a $4,000 order with Thompson's Computer. On the same card, bought a $5,000 Dell refurb. And that order went through, got the items in. I was like, oh, shit, that's not bad. $9,000 in one lick, that's not bad. Yeah. So got on Counterfeit Library, uploaded the review. Up until that point in time, what we were doing with Counterfeit Library was fake IDs, eBay fraud, PayPal fraud. That's what we were doing, straight scams. That's the only things that we knew how to do. When I posted that review, Counterfeit Library switches from that identity theft and scam type of site over to a credit card theft site within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. They went fucking nuts on it. Mm-hmm. And that's when really cybercrime starts to explode at that point in time. So, we bring the Ukrainians over because they didn't have the ability to cash out. Ukrainians have got the products. They've got some know-how on how to commit these types of crime. And let's be honest, at that point in time, credit card fraud, you didn't have to have know-how. You didn't have to worry about IP addresses or devices or anything else like that. The only thing you needed to do was just order and have a drop address and know how to use the drop address. That was it. It was later on that security starts to come into play. So we started eating these sites alive. What happens is, as you're doing that, you find out pretty quickly that when you're hungry, you're not able to innovate on things. It's when you start getting money in and able to eat and relax a bit that crime starts to innovate. And we see that to this day. These days, you don't have much innovation on cybercrime because of security, because you got a bunch of new blood coming in. They're not sophisticated. They don't understand the dynamics of crime. back then, we understood that. Like this, the difference between criminals then and now is back then, you grew with the security that was coming into play. You learned how that security operated, how to overcome it. You had to understand how to run drop addresses, how to launder money, the dynamics of most everything you understood. Like we understood law enforcement and the dollar amounts of specific cities. We knew to keep it under, $1 million in New York is what the threshold was for federal law enforcement to look at you. So we knew to keep these things under these types of amounts. And then you move on is what you do. These days, crime is different. You don't have to understand any dynamic of the fraud or the crime that you're committing at all. Everything's off the shelf and done for you. You can buy tutorials, you can take live instruction classes. Mm-hmm. All these things are done for you. Back then, it wasn't like that. You had to understand everything out of the gate. So that's because of that, more innovation took place. You had the advent of synthetic fraud. You had what got law enforcement's attention on us.
So when you say, Brett, let me stop you right there. So synthetic fraud, like what do you exactly mean by the definition? Like what's the definition of a synthetic fraud?
So one of the things that we were looking at was how to create brand new identities, okay? And the way that we did it back then, prior to 9/11, 9/11 changes everything. So prior to 9/11, what you could do, like my name is Brett Johnson. I was born in 1970, January 22nd, 1970, okay? What I can do is, prior to 9/11 is I could create a fake birth certificate for Brett Johnson, except instead of having January 22nd, 1970 as my birth date, I would have it January 22nd, 2023, or I would just be a year old. I would send that in to the Social Security Administration. They would issue a Social Security number for Brett Johnson, born January 22nd, 2023, all right? What do I do with that? Well, what I do with it is I go and get a job. I get a job using that brand new Social Security number, except when I fill out the application, I put January 22nd, 1970 as the birth date. When that goes through the system, it's flagged immediately, all right? Social Security Administration, prior to 9/11, they would look at it and they would say, well, obviously it's an error, and they would fix it. So they would change it from 2023 back to 1970, giving me a brand new social, which is kind of a cornerstone to creating a brand new identity.
And your existing or the old Social Security still would be intact.
It would, but I wouldn't have to use that anymore. I'd use the new social, start springboarding a new identity on that. Now, synthetic fraud's different. 2011, what was going on was if I had the last four of your social, your date of birth, and the place you were born, it's very easy for me to figure out the first 5 digits of that Social Security number. That was eating identity theft alive at that point. The Social Security Administration, they wanted to fix that. So what they did was they randomized Social Security numbers. So now, if you're issued a Social Security number after 2011, it's no longer tied to the year of birth or the state of birth, okay? It's all randomized, which cures that. It fixes that identity theft problem completely. You can't do that anymore, okay? But because it's now randomized, now I can use a child's Social Security number, or I can fabricate a number out of thin air just going by the algorithm and use that to create an identity, a synthetic identity, okay? So what I do is typically you go on the dark web or one of these criminal marketplaces, you buy a child's Social Security number for $25, okay? For that, you get the child's social, mother's maiden, place of birth, date of birth, all right? The only thing I'm going to do is use the social. I'm going to attach a name to it, an adult date of birth. I'm going to apply for credit. Now, credit bureaus don't know you exist until you tell them you exist. So if they've never seen that data before, that application for credit will be denied. But when it's denied, what happens? It actually creates that credit profile in the credit bureau system. So now you have that ghost in the system. That synthetic identity is there. The idea now is to build credit on that to the point you can cash it out. How do you do that? Well, first stop is open source intelligence, because it turns out that when you apply for credit, they don't just pull the credit report. They're also looking for anything that associates that name with the address. So you go to whitepages.com or White Pages Pro. You input that data in there. All right. So over the next couple of weeks, you put the name and an address on there. Over the next couple of weeks, that name is associated with it. Any type of internet scrapers that are out there starts to scrape that data. You start to get spam mail, physical mail sent to that address and that name, everything else. At the same time I do that, I'll go out and I'll apply for rewards cards at groceries, airlines, pharmacies. That way you've got that data that's being built. These days, you also need to come up with a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page because you've got these companies that are looking for that to verify that you're a real person. So you create all this stuff. That takes care of any type of OSINT that's out there. Then you go on. Well, what you used to do is you would go to Capital One and you would get a secured card, all right, which is very easy to get in that synthetic profile. That secured card starts to report to credit reporting agencies, building from that. Then from there, you go and apply for other credit cards and build it up from there. And in the United States, you've got this thing called credit piggybacking. So that you've got a credit card. You can add me as an authorized user of your credit card. The next reporting cycle of that card's specific history now becomes my credit history, which boosts my credit score up, all right? It also, so backtrack a little bit. If I'm using that with a synthetic identity, so that brand new identity is in the credit bureau system. If I add on an authorized user to someone else's credit trade line, it boosts the credit score of that synthetic identity, but it also changes the age of that synthetic credit identity in the credit bureau. So while I created that identity in the credit bureau maybe a month ago, if I add on a credit trade line that's 10 years old, it causes that credit profile to now look like it's 10 years old of all positive credit history. So you can actually pump a brand new identity from a 0 credit score up to 760 within 60 days. So what do you do at that point? Well, that depends on the skill level of the criminal. If you're somebody that doesn't know a damn thing at all, and this is where this stuff begins, is in the neighborhoods that they were poor, they had exhausted their credit, they just wanted to have phones, cars, furniture. So those type of people, you can go down and get a credit $20,000 loan, you can get a car, you can get furniture, you can get an ATV, crap like that. If you're more skilled identity theft, what you do is you open up the credit accounts, you make payments on those damn things. So that 12 months down the line, you can cash out, $60,000, $80,000. Or if you're even more skilled, what you do at that point is you understand, well, I can use someone's real identity, create a synthetic profile in their name as well, mix the two together, and apply for business credit. And that business credit, those trade lines are $200,000 a pop. So it all depends on the skill level of the attacker that's out there as far as the profit goes. But synthetic fraud right now, it's a $50 billion a year industry for the criminals. It's 20% of all credit card chargebacks. Think about that.
Yeah.
All credit card chargebacks, it's 20%. It's 5 to 7% of all overall credit card debt. It's eating the industry alive. All financial institutions have to worry about it. It's bleeding over into retail establishments with this refund fraud that's going on. Yeah. It's really something that looks to damage not only the trust, but every facet of our financial lives at the end of the day.
So, I mean, compared to what it used to be, I'm sure because of like the awareness and because of a lot of the talk about how these crimes are being committed and things like that. So every corporation and every individuals are they're a little bit more well tuned to these things now, right? Sure. But still, like you pointed out earlier, that when you're there's a lot of innovation. I'm pretty sure that's going to be done in the way how these crimes are being committed, and every single day, I'm sure we're going to have more of these. So compared to what it used to be back in the day, Brett, as far as how the crimes were committed, like from in the cyber world, right now, has there been any major changes? Like maybe like the fundamental layers of these crimes are very similar, but I mean, if we talk about, let's say, a couple of the ones that I really want to talk to you about was the SolarWinds. And sure. Also the Bangladesh, the Swift code hack, I believe it was like the Lazarus group that was responsible for that. And then the really base of that was, criminals really installing malware on your system, and it was collecting data, and they was like sort of operating that. Now,
Sure.
from your perspective, do you see that happening like currently, and also is that going to be moving forward? Are we going to constantly see that?
So the problem is, from an attacker point of view, it boils down to what am I willing to do? All right. So if you look at an attack, why is the attack happening? It's one of three reasons: status, cash, ideology. Status, I'm trying to impress my criminal peers. Because if I impress them, I gain everyone's respect, and that equates to more profit at the end of the day. Cash, easy enough. I'm looking to profit. Ideology, you've pissed me off, and I'm going to get you. Just you, all right? That, if you know the motivation of the attacker, you'll understand the persistence of the attack. If it's cash-based, that's the lowest hanging fruit. I'm not really worried about you specifically. I'm looking for the easiest access, gives me the largest return on that access. Status. Status is a little bit more persistent because I'm not worried about the easiest security. I'm looking for something that impresses my peers, okay? Something that I can do that impresses peers. So if you think about it, you see these people on Facebook, on YouTube that rap about committing crime. Mm-hmm. Or they'll show the wads of cash that they've stolen. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because you've got an attacker there that has no real skill. How do you impress your criminal peers if you have no skill? You do it by showing I'm able to steal this much damn money. That's how you do it. And that works like a charm. Okay, so that's why they're doing that. All right. Compared to ideology, I don't care how much security you've got. Mm-hmm. I'm looking always to get you. So understand the motivation. You understand the persistence and the willingness of that attacker. You cannot dismiss the willingness of that criminal that's out there. Okay, that matters. It absolutely matters. Okay. Now at the same time, understand that these days, even back then, and I'm not a coder. I'm not. I'm a fraudster. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So understand that most attackers are not computer geniuses. Mm-hmm. They're not, but they don't need to be. And the reason they don't need to be is that 90% plus of every single attack uses known exploits. It's not zero-day attacks. Mm-hmm. It's not things we don't know about. It's typically stuff that we've been told about for years. Yeah. That causes that threat landscape that's out there. You mentioned SolarWinds. So the two biggest attacks that are out there, you've got NotPetya, mm-hmm. and you've got SolarWinds. That's what you've got. Both of those nation-state attacks. Nation-state. Now, SolarWinds, if they ever actually tally it up, it will dwarf everything across the planet. All right? If they're brave enough to do that. Right now, NotPetya. All right? That's the biggest one on paper right now is NotPetya. Mm-hmm. Look at NotPetya. What was it? It was a sandworm group, top hacking group on the planet, that decides they're going to attack the Ukraine. How do they do that? Well, they fake a Microsoft certificate, a known exploit, to take over basically the QuickBooks of the Ukraine. All right? Take it over. Then they launch this thing that looks like ransomware, but it's not. It's just simply out there to destroy hard drives. All right? Mm-hmm. They use Mimikatz. What's the one? Is it Mimikatz? Harvests credentials out of RAM. Yeah. So they use that, known exploit. Mm-hmm. They use Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance, known exploits that were patched 14 months prior that no one applied the patch to. They look for outward-facing SMBs, mm-hmm. which was something we've been talking about for years. You wouldn't think that there would be a whole lot of those that are out there. But turns out there were millions. So that attack quickly gets outside of the confines of the borders of the Ukraine, hits Maersk, hits pharmaceutical companies that have still not been mentioned today, causes like $50 billion worth of damage at the end of the day. All right? All known exploits chained together, launched by the top hacking group on the planet, Sandworm. All right? It's not 0 days. It's the stuff that we know about that we're not doing anything about. You take business email compromise, for example. Business email compromise, the number one way to do that to this day is using Unicode domains. So I own anglerfish.com. Mm-hmm. I can register a Unicode domain. So for those who don't know, what a Unicode domain is it's using non-English alphabet characters to register a domain that looks very similar to what should be there. Then you come in and you launch this business email compromise, and that right there is $12 million a day, $7 billion is what the attack yearly is on that. Very successful. All right. So it's known exploits. At the same time, you've got you look at Marriott, for example. Marriott gets hit with this. The statistic is that 56% of companies are attacked through third parties. All right. So what that means is that how many third-party companies are accessing your system? Of those, are they vetted? Well, typically not. Well, come to find out that your network is about as strong as the weakest company that accesses it, and that's how Marriott gets compromised. 41%, this comes from Visa, 41% of all routers have the default password. Are you freaking kidding me? That's your bank, for God's sakes.
Yeah, wasn't one of the talks that for SolarWinds that really assisted in this hack was one of the interns had their password as Solar123 or something along the lines of that.
SolarWinds 123.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think about that for a second. You got Colonial Pipeline. Their VPN password was on the dark web. It had been for a couple years. No one had changed it. And they knew. The worst thing is they knew it was out there and still didn't change that. So you've got all these areas that create that threat landscape that's out there. It's not, the problem is not computer geniuses. You know, we've got 8,500 plus security companies that are out there. You've got mass media that's out there, and they're intent on creating that online attacker as that hacker that operates in the shadows. That's a ghost that you'll never be able to catch. That is a lie. It's a lie. The problem is you've got a lot of companies that are just not practicing good cybersecurity hygiene. You've got a lot of individuals that don't do that as well. All right. When I was caught, Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes, August of 2004. And a couple months later, October 26, 2004, United States Secret Service, they arrested 33 of us, 6 countries, 6 hours. I was the only guy publicly mentioned as getting away. A couple others did as well. I go to work for the Secret Service, and I'm the idiot that continues to break the law from inside the offices for the next 10 months until they find out about it, at which point I take off on a cross-country crime spree, steal $600,000 in 4 months, wake up one morning the night before I've been in Las Vegas, had stolen $160,000 out of ATMs, woke up the next morning, signed on to cartersmarket.com, and there's my name, United States Most Wanted, beside of it. So dipshit that I am, I sit there a minute looking at it and literally said out loud, well, Brett, you've made the United States Most Wanted list. What are you going to do now? I'm going to Disney World. And I did. So I go to Disney World, and I lasted 4 or 5 weeks. They caught me using back then it was called Triggerfish. Today it's called the Stingray, this cell phone simulating device. Can pinpoint you within 7 feet. So they caught me using that. And when Secret Service caught me, I had been stealing identities. And the way I did that was I had posted for job listings on Indeed and Monster is what I'd done. And once the people had applied, I'd got copies of their driver's license, their socials, everything at that point. So I remember Secret Service came in, they were like, well, how did you get all of that information? And I looked at the guy and I was like, I simply asked them for it. And that's the problem, is you've got individuals or companies, even to this day, they are not practicing good security. You know, we've been bitching for years now about good password security, doing away with passwords, being aware of your environment, things like that. And people are still not doing that. Companies are still not doing that.
So, Brett, that's actually a great point to talk about, right? So from your perspective, the day-to-day activity, you know, for like a common man like myself or someone who's out there, right?
Right.
What would be like your general, let's say if you're traveling, for example, or let's say you're just at your home or wherever you are, what are like the general good practices that you have while surfing the net? Like, for example, do you get on the VPNs and do you have like some of these? Obviously, it's generally a good idea to change your passwords and things like that, like, you know,
Sure.
With a different period of time. What would be your typical suggestions out to people that will help them?
All right. So, and I'm asked this pretty frequently. The first thing, I think really what's most important is that situational awareness. All right, understanding, like when I take a trip, if I'm taking a road trip, and I do a lot of road trips, my wife is very good that when she comes with me, she always tells me that I'm very good about finding the worst part of that town immediately. All right? I always do. The thing about it is we, as human beings, in the physical world, we have that situational awareness. We know when we've taken a wrong turn. We know when we start seeing bars on the windows that something doesn't feel right. Or if we're in a store and something just causes the hackles, that situational awareness is there. For some reason, that does not translate very well to an online environment. We tend to trust. So you're talking about, I mentioned building trust with that potential victim. If I can't get you to trust me, I can't scam you. I can't defraud you, okay? Trust online works because of technology. We inherently trust that technology. What we don't understand is that attackers use a variety of tools to manipulate that technology. That lays a base level of trust, and then we see how good of a liar or a social engineer is what the nice term for it, that attacker is in manipulating you, all right? What we need to understand is that regardless of the platform that you're on, there are predators in that environment, all right? If we can understand that, now that doesn't mean to be paranoid. That doesn't mean not to go to Facebook or eBay or where have you. That's just understanding that wherever we are, that dating site or whatever, there are people on that site that are looking to victimize me. If you can just understand that, you'll start to act appropriately. I promise you, you will, all right? So at the same time, if you get that base down, at the same time start to understand that, like when I travel, no, I don't use a VPN. I don't. But I also don't check my friggin' bank account over the hotel's Wi-Fi. All right? So it's understanding that, okay, I don't need a VPN when I travel. But I do need to practice some damn common sense when I'm traveling as well.
But let's say if you really have to get into the bank account, like so your wife calls you up and says, "Hey, Brad, I need to do this or whatever." What do you do? Yeah.
Well,
when the boss calls you, what do you do?
So, what I do, and this happened. I was in Oklahoma City, and I'd given a presentation at the FBI field office there. Came outside, and was getting ready to fly home. Got in the rental car and went to get gas. My card shut down. Like, what the hell, man? Called Wells Fargo. Because, yes, I bank with Wells Fargo because I believe one criminal deserves another. So called Wells Fargo. Did you just try to buy an iPhone in Nebraska? I was like, no, I did not. Well, we're shutting your card down. I was like, what the hell am I going to do? Because at that point, I didn't have credit cards or anything. I had a debit card because I had just gotten started on this legal career of mine. So that year, I got hit 4 times with card fraud. 4 times. I was literally on the way to Bengaluru, of all places, and going to the airport in Atlanta, card gets shut down at that point. What do you do? So fortunately, I had the cell phone. I would surf the bank through that and everything else. So if I'm in a different country, I don't check my bank account from that other country. I'll call my wife and tell her to do it, something like that. I don't use VPNs. I never have. Well, I have.
When you had to, probably.
Well, I guess I could admit it. So I don't do internet piracy, okay? Unless, come to find out, you can't watch Star Wars in 4K, the original version, unless you pirate the damn thing. Okay? So if I'm downloading that, I'm going to use a VPN. Or if I'm looking for Disney's Song of the South, it's a good movie, it's racist as hell, but you can't buy that in the United States on HD. So you're going to have to download its ass. So yeah, I'll use a VPN for that. But, VPN for banks or stuff like that, I don't. I don't. I'm at the house. I'm secure at the house. My cell phone, I'll use a cell phone to check bank account on that. Other than that, I'm not using, hotel Wi-Fi. Yeah, I'll surf, LinkedIn on hotel Wi-Fi or Twitter on hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't use a VPN or anything.
Understood. Okay.
I just practice some good common sense. I'm absolutely a believer in password security. So for the kiddos out there, how many of you guys use the same password and login across multiple websites? And the answer is most of you, 80%. 80%. So that becomes a huge issue with this thing called credential stuffing. All right, if I send out an email, a phishing email from Bank of America, your level of awareness is hopefully going to be high enough that you're going to realize that, yeah, that's a phishing email. Probably that Brett Johnson guy that was on his show sent that to me. So you're not going to fall for that. But what happens if I send out that phishing email from Hulu? Level of awareness is high? No, because you don't care about your Hulu account. You don't. You care about your Bank of America account. Hulu, you don't give a damn about that, so you're going to fall for that. The problem is that if you use the same or similar credentials for Hulu that you're using for your financial institution, I got you. Because it's automated for me. I go to sleep, I plug it in to the program. It tries to log into thousands of websites while I'm asleep. I wake up the next morning, I've got Hulu, Netflix, Bank of America, IRS, all this other stuff. It's going to make me money at the end of the day. So proper password security. I used to talk about password managers. Let's be honest, they've had some issues. So whatever that means for you, that's I use an authenticator in conjunction with a password manager as well. So I believe in doing that. I even tell people that as long as you don't take it to work, have a password notebook. I'm fine with that because no one breaks in your house to steal your password notebook. They don't do that crap. So practice good password security is really the big thing. Freeze the credit of every single person in the house, including the kids. Monitor your accounts as well. Place alerts on those accounts. Those are the big things. Then from there you go into multi-factor authentication, stuff like that. That's for individuals. For companies, how do I gain a company's trust? I alluded to that before. It's credentials, it's credit card numbers, it's stolen identities, it's devices, browser fingerprints, it's things like that. Understand from either an individual or a company point of view what it takes for that attacker to gain trust in that environment. Design security around that. Understand the motivation for the attack. Is it status cache ideology? Like I gave a presentation for Chanel a couple years ago. Chanel is very unique because they get hit on all three of those attack vectors. They have all the money in the world because they're Chanel. They're French. People hate the French. So you got the ideological attack there. And then you've got the status. Well, I defrauded Chanel. So they get all three vectors there, all three motivations. So understand, most companies aren't like that. Understand why you're being attacked. Design security around that. Understand what it takes to gain that trust. Design security around that. Understand what they're looking for. An attacker is looking for information, access, data, or cash. Understand what they're looking for. Design security around that. You don't have to design security around something that you're never going to experience.
Yep. So I've listened to in the past talk about social engineering, and there's different ways to do that.
Right.
In your, I guess, criminal career, the past life, what were the typical methods that you use? I know you talked about, initially you were talking about like selling the thing over the eBay, right, to the lady, and you were the first one to message whoever won that bid. You sort of established that like the attacker and the victim sort of like part in that, right? So what were like the typical social engineering skills that you used in your
So talking about social engineering, and again, that's a friendly, nice euphemism for how good of a liar someone is. Let's be honest about it. I mean, so they call it social engineering. It's being a con man. It's being a liar. All right. There's a difference between these gray hats or white hats that are out there that talk about social engineering compared to an actual criminal doing it. All right. So you go to DEF CON, which I like DEF CON. It's all these people who gather together to talk about exploits and vulnerabilities that no criminal will ever do. All right. You've got, of course, the social engineering farm there, and you read about these things about how one of the social engineers went and they got all the hotel keys at MGM, or they went in everyone's room, they stole all the laptops, and that's the social engineering attack, and it gets a lot of headlines. That's not the way social engineering actually works. What you're wanting to do is you're wanting to do the actual smallest thing that causes that potential victim to think that they are acting of their own accord. You don't want them to ever know they've been lied to, they've been social engineered, because once they understand that, the gig's up. You're not going to be able to get what you want to out of them. So you want them to think that they're choosing to do this of their own free will. All right, so it's the smallest thing that results in doing what you want to do. I've given this example. It's been a while since I've given this. So back when I was committing crime, we did a lot of account takeovers. All right, and back then you wanted to take over credit cards or bank accounts. So I would go on the dark web or marketplace, or I would fish somebody out and get their identity profile. Like today, I can go on one of these marketplaces and I can buy your complete identity profile for $50 up to $130, depending on location, gender, credit score, okay, of the victim. Once you have that tends to answer. In the United States, we still tend to go by KBA, knowledge-based authentication. That's those security questions that people ask or customer service asks in order to grant you access to the system. So what I would do is, and remember I talked about how trust is established through technology, tools, social engineering. Okay, so what you do is I've got that tool. I've gathered the data. That identity, that's the tool that I need, the data that I need to launch the attack, cast that crime out. I'm wanting to take over your bank account. All right. So what I'll do is I'll call. I don't know who you bank with. Don't tell me, because you should never tell a criminal that. So I'll call Bank of America, spoofing your actual phone number. Okay. Why am I doing that? Well, because customer service, they trust the technology that's in front of them. They see the phone number coming across on the screen, your phone number, the phone number that's on file. They're immediately trusting that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call and I'm going to say, hey, I just need to check the available balance on the account. So they're typically going to ask two security questions. One of those security questions is going to be mother's maiden name, usually, all right? I know your mother's maiden name. I've got it in front of me. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to get it wrong on purpose. Okay? So I'm going to say Johnson. Well, I'm sorry, sir, that's not what we've got. Well, what have you got? Well, we're not going to tell you what we've got. Okay, I don't know what you've got, but I know what my mom's name is. What are you guys even doing over there? So what are they trained to do at that point in time? They're trained to ask a couple of more security questions, which I have the answers to. I get those correct, then what happens? Then they change the mother's maiden name to whatever I want them to change the name to, give me the balance that's on the account, and then supposedly the call ends. But before that call ends, right as it's ending, what am I going to do? Oh, by the way, can you update my phone number that's on file? And they typically do that. So the reason that this all happens, all right, I've got the real mother's maiden name. I'm going to miss it because that creates a problem that I'm going to solve. As I'm solving that, it allows me to build rapport with the customer service agent and also answer more of the security questions that are out there, layering more trust on top of that. It also, because it creates a problem, it also creates a distraction. My goal is not to get the available balance. My goal is to change the phone number that's on the file. Because if I change the phone number to a phone number that I control the account at that point, okay? So, miss the mother's maiden. Two more security questions, layer trust, build rapport with the agent, distract the agent from what's going on. As the call is ending, the mindset of the agent is already looking forward to the next call that's coming in line. At that point, by the way, can you update my phone number that's on file? And the answer is yes. Now, how effective is that attack? And that's a social engineering attack. How effective is that? It's so effective that I've been asked, why are you updating the phone number that's on file? And my answer has been, I no longer have that number. I no longer have the number that's literally on the screen in front of them that's calling in. All right? And it happens because you've distracted, you've layered trust, you've built rapport all the way through. And you understand at the same time that they are trusting what's in front of them the entire way. All right? Now, if I were to call in immediately and say, I'm looking to update my phone number, are they going to do that? No, they're going to boot me to some other level of security. I'm not even going to talk to customer service. They're going to update me to fraud control or some bullshit like that. No, you don't want to do that. You want to do just the base level that you can to get the largest return on that attack. That's the way social engineering works. The other thing you need to understand is that as a con man, I'm getting where I don't like to use social engineering as a term. As a con man, as a liar, you have to be able to read that person almost immediately. All right. So when you've got that customer service rep on the phone, you have to be able to tell by their vocal inflections, by how confident they are. Are they new? Have they been around for a while? Do they understand what's going on? Or, and that dictates how you will behave toward that potential victim. Am I going to behave dominantly? Am I going to be more submissive? What's going to go on at that point? All that dictates that. So you have to be able to read people almost immediately. You have to be able to ping exactly what it takes to manipulate that person almost on a dime. Now, the thing is that I became this liar, this social engineer, as a child. I was in this abusive environment, and I had to be able to know what the adults in my circle were thinking and learn how to manipulate that as a survival mechanism. And you see that's very common among more skilled criminals that are out there. I don't care if it's computer criminals or drug dealers or mafia or whatever. They become these social engineers as children, and then later they use those tools to victimize and manipulate people through their adult lives. And that's exactly what I did as well.
Okay. I know you talked about earlier, you went into a little bit of the tax fraud or the IRS fraud that you're sort of going into that. Can you take us through like your journey about like how you sort of went about, because I know you got introduced to the eBay frauds and
Sure.
the other stuff, but like how were you dealing with like the IRS, and how were you able to kind of do that?
All right. So like I said, Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew. The Counterfeit Library transitions over to Shadow Crew. We back then you had a lot of databases, and today you still do. You had a lot of databases that were just open. Okay, so the first database that I had access to was the Indiana State Sex Offenders Registry. And just found that by Googling, by searching, by just spending hours online, happened upon it, got access to it. At that point in time, that registry had mother's maiden, social, date of birth, all the information that you needed on that individual. So I'm sitting there going, huh? And my thought was, well, they're sex offenders. No one's going to care if you victimize those people. They're going to kind of cheer you on, if nothing else. So I started to use those identities to open up bank accounts. All right. So at that point in time, it was Counterfeit Library, and I said before that every business transaction went through me. Every product and service, I had a hand in everything at that point. The reason why Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, and then Carter Planet, the reason why those things kind of solidify cybercrime as we know it today is because of the vouching mechanism that was in place. You had that large communication channel, you had the brand name of the criminals themselves that were going on, but you also had vouching that was going on. So if I vouched for someone, if I said, hey, this guy is good, you can trust him, you can buy from him. What that means is that if that guy then rips you off, you don't go to that guy. You come to me, and I will cover your losses. That becomes pretty expensive after a while, all right? So if the guy's charging you, and IDs back then cost $300, they're $40 today. So an ID costs $300. If someone rips you off on an ID, he's not going to go to the guy. He's going to come to Brett saying, hey, Gollum, this guy ripped me off of $300. What are you going to do about it? You vouched for him. I have to cover that, okay? The way I typically covered that was, I got a bank account for you. You need that? Everyone needs bank accounts. You need to launder that money through. You need those stolen checks, deposits, whatever that are being through. You need that in a bank account. So I typically sold those things for $300, or I would just give you a few bank accounts if you got ripped off, and it would make things right, okay? So I opened up bank accounts using the state sex offenders. At that point in time, the only online bank was NetBank over in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I ate them alive. I really did. It got so bad that the Indiana State Sex Offenders database, after this was 4 or 5 months, they started to remove the socials. Then they removed the mother's maiden. Then they removed the date of birth. Then the only thing you had was the person's picture and their name and address after a while, all right? So that was the first database. From there, we had access to the Texas driver's license database, which was very effective. I mean, if you have access to a driver's license database, the amount of crime that you can commit is legion. And so we were creating fake driver's licenses, stealing the identities from that. You had all the correct information on there. Just the picture was different. So ate fraud alive on that. And then finally, I came across the California Death Index. And that index is still alive today. It has the mother's maiden, the social security number, date of birth of everyone who has died in California. So I started looking at that, and the idea that I had was I was like, okay, so these people who died, who would now be over 62, 63 years of age, I wonder if you can file for Social Security benefits on those individuals. So how do you find that out? Well, first of all, you have to figure out, okay, how does the federal government know if someone is dead? That's the main question. Because if the federal government doesn't know that, chances are you can get some sort of benefit from the federal government for that individual. So you start to research. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of the good guys don't understand is that a real criminal, not just some script kiddie, but a real criminal, we do our research. We will crawl up your ass to figure out how to do this stuff. So come to find out, the federal government, the way they know you're dead prior to 1997 is the family had to file for a Social Security death benefit. Only pays like $218, okay? But prior to 97, it took the family to do that. If the family didn't file that, the federal government was never notified that that individual died. Now, after 97, the hospital could do it, funeral home could do that. Prior to 97, most families didn't do that because, hey, they had just lost a loved one. They weren't worried about $200. You can keep that bullshit, all right? So the state would know you were dead. The federal government would not. So what happens is there's this book called Day of the Jackal, written by Frederick Forsyth. Excellent book, made a couple of movies out of as well. As a matter of fact, Apple's got a mini-series on it, that same damn thing, all right? Frederick Forsyth is a phenomenal author in such that he actually does a couple of things. Another book that he's got, he details how his main character steals a specific piece of artwork out of a museum. The way he detailed that was later used by a group of criminals to steal that same damn piece of artwork out of that same damn museum. In Day of the Jackal, what he does is he creates this thing called the dead baby method, all right? So the dead baby method, the main character in Day of the Jackal, he goes to a cemetery. He finds the grave of a child that would approximately be his same age if the child had lived. He then takes over that child's identity and goes off and targets Charles de Gaulle for assassination using that identity, all right? That worked like a charm and still does in many countries in this world, okay? So what I did was I was like, okay, what I can do is for Social Security, I can start looking at people who would hopefully be, age to get Social Security benefits and go from there. And I don't know why I told that story about Charles de Gaulle and Day of the Jackal. It doesn't have to do with Social Security benefits. I got sidetracked. But so I start trying to apply for Social Security benefits for these people. All right. No, they want you to come in for an interview. Not going to do that because my ass does not look like 65. I was like 34 at that point in time. So not going to do that shit. The next idea I had was, well, I wonder if you could apply for income tax returns on these people. Come to find out you can. So what I would do is I got to the point, and people after me, Daniel Rigmaiden and a few other guys, they automated the process. I was all manual at that point in time. I got to where I could file, and it was all 1040 EZ. Online, I got to where I could file one tax return every 6 minutes, okay? And I would do that Monday through Wednesday. Thursday, I would take a road trip, plot out a map of ATMs. Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday, I would cash out prepaid debit cards that were loaded with income tax returns. Typically, I would steal $160,000 a week. Of course, at that point in time, and they still do, ATMs gave out mostly $20 bills. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, the backpacks like college kids carry to classes, that backpack will hold $120,000 worth of $20 bills stacked properly. So I would put $120,000 in a backpack. I had a house in Charleston, South Carolina. I would come home, chuck the backpack in a spare bedroom, and forget about it. And then one day, you open up that spare bedroom and you see all those backpacks, and you're like, shit, I got to do something with all that money. Yeah. And then you find out how to launder money at that point. So I had some cash-based businesses. I had a stage production company, things like that. I had bank accounts that were in Mexico and the Caymans, throughout Europe. And then finally all the money ended up at Bank Latico in Estonia, of all places. That's what happened with the money. It was despicable, man. I mean, you think about using just dead people's identities to file income tax returns. I didn't give a damn about the families of the people I was filing on. So, when they find out that you've got asshole Brett Johnson that's been using your loved one to profit on, they get to relive the death of that individual at the same time. And then it moved over into me, stealing W-2s of living individuals. And at that point, you've got someone that's, and hell, I was no different. When I was, before I was engaged in crime, I saw my family, they would rely on that tax return to buy furniture or just to survive. And I'm the dipshit that's responsible for everyone's tax return still being delayed to this day. I'm the guy who created that friggin' crime. The damage that was caused, that I caused, the harm, you can't overstate that. You can't. And I see that to this day. I'm on the dark web every day. I'm on Telegram every day, under my real name, talking to people and gathering information and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And you see this rhetoric coming from criminals, and I was no different of, well, I'm just stealing from banks. I'm just stealing from governments. No one's a victim here. Yeah, you got victims throughout, man. Like during the pandemic, for example. Unemployment fraud, 8 states alive. All right, like California, for example, I think it's at $43 billion plus or something like that. Who's paying for that at the end of the day? Well, the state of California is not paying for that. The federal government's not paying for that. The way California has to repay all those fraud losses, the way they're repaying that is they're raising the unemployment tax from $9 an employee to $420 an employee over a 9-year span. So everyone pays for that at the end of the day. And that's one of the things that in order for you to commit crime, you have to understand, and I see this a lot, people say that criminals are sociopaths. Some of us absolutely are, all right? Some of us do not give a damn about the moral implications of what we're doing. The truth of the matter is that most of us are not sociopaths. Most of us do care, and we have to justify those crimes. So we come up with these rationalizations. You know, I did it for my wife, my girlfriend, my stripper girlfriend, whatever. You know, you come up with rationalizations, or, you know, I have to do this in order to survive. And that allows you to set aside that moral compass and commit these crimes. And that's no different than what you see every single day when you see this rhetoric of coming up of, I'm not hurting anyone. They can afford it. I'm just stealing from the government. No, by God, you're not. You're hurting everyone across the board. You're hurting people that you don't know. You're hurting your friends, your family. You're lying to everyone. I was no different in that at all.
What was the turning point for you then? Like, at some point in time, you know, now you're on the other side and you see whatever happened at the beginning, or, you know, the other portion of your life, and then what was like the cutoff point for you? That's when you realized that, you know what, man, whatever I've been doing, like, this is a shitty thing that I've been doing for all these years, and I gotta do better. What was like that turning point for you?
So, I mean, I lied. Best lie I ever told. I told you I've been working with the Secret Service, and I go on this run, get caught, and I'm at a county jail in Orlando, Florida, the Orange County Jail, and they have a federal holding there. I was very fortunate throughout my entire prison career of having people that would look out for me. And this one guy that was at the holding there, he was in for meth charges, and he went by the name of Yeti, and had this long white hair, this long white beard. And he kind of takes me under his wing, you know. And one day he's talking to me. He's like, you know, Brett, the only time you get off in federal prison is the drug program. And I was like, Yeti, I don't use drugs. And he was like, well, Brett, I think you could find a drug habit, can't you? And I was like, Yeti, I think I can find a drug habit. So the feds were so pissed off at me, they gave me diesel therapy. And what that is that's this process of wearing you down emotionally and physically and mentally by stopping at every single county jail they possibly can between where you're caught and your final destination. All right, so it took me like 2.5 weeks to get from Orlando back to Charleston, because they would stop at every county jail they could. They would get you processed, which takes 4 to 8 hours before you hit your bunk. All right, so they get you processed 4 to 8 hours in a holding cell where you can't really sleep or anything else like that. You got all the noise and all that. You hit the bunk, go to sleep. Next thing you know, Brett Johnson, pack your shit, you're leaving. Then you go to the next county jail. Bang, 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 bang. So during processing at all those county jails, they ask you, do you use any type of drugs? Well, yes, I do. What do you use? Cocaine and alcohol. So do you want help for that? Yes, I do. So I had this paperwork history by the time I get to Charleston of, hey, this guy's saying he's an alcoholic, big drug guy, everything else. He needs help. He wants help. So my lawyer was Paul Thurmond, Strom Thurmond's son, you know, big guy in Charleston, South Carolina. Of course, I had paid for him with stolen money. Turns out you can't pay for a lawyer with stolen money. They won't let you do that. So they make me drop him. They give me this guy named Jimmy Rogers, who I swear to God looked exactly like Lando Calrissian. You know, the Billy D. Williams from the malt liquor commercials looked exactly like him. They give me him as a public pretender. The only thing he does that was good, he stands up at my arraignment and he asks the judge to order a mental evaluation for me. And the judge says yes. So, okay. So I'm back at the county jail. Psychologist comes in. It's like a 4-hour interview. About halfway through the interview, he looks at me. He's like, use any type of drugs? Yes, sir. What do you use? Cocaine? Smoke or snort? Snort. How much do you snort? An 8-ball a day. And he looks at me. He's like, that's a lot. I was like, yeah. He's like, you have any trouble out of that? I was like, yes. I can't get an erection. And I'm silent like that. And he looks at me, and I'm looking at him. And I got that from watching the movie Boogie Nights, where Mark Wahlberg, that end shot where he can't stand to attention, I'm like, that's got to be real. So he's silent. I'm silent. Finally, I'm like, is that right? And he looks at me. He's like, it could happen. And he says, is it still happening now? And I'm like, no, not that I need it to. And he's like, okay. So that makes it into my PSR. So in federal sentencing, the probation office and prosecutor, when the judge gives you time, they sit down beforehand. They do this in-depth background check that tells the judge how much time this son of a bitch should get in federal prison. That drug use makes it into that. The problem is that Secret Service, they knew I was full of shit. So they tell the prosecutor tells the judge, hey, this guy's not using any type of drugs. So day of my sentencing, the prosecutor stands up and he's screaming. Johnson has manipulated the prosecutor, the Secret Service, and today he's manipulating you, Your Honor. We insist on the upper limits of the guidelines. Judge looks at me, I agree, and it's like 75 months. I'm like, huh. Now, I had already been bragging back in the cell that if they give me any more than 60 months, I am not staying. I'm going to release myself of my own accord. So, 75 months. I looked at my lawyer. I was like, can you get the drug program for me? And he was like, I don't know. I'll ask. So he stands up. We order the drug program for Mr. Johnson. Judge is like, no, but I'll recommend he gets evaluated for it. I look at my lawyer. It's like, what does that mean? Well, you're probably not going to get it. I was like, okay, how soon can you get me to the camp? Because that's where I was going. He's like, well, if you don't appeal, I can get you there pretty quick. I was like, my exact words were, F the appeal, get me to the camp, I'll take it from there. He looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the world. A few weeks later, I'm at the camp, and I ended up escaping. That's what happens. And I got caught a few weeks after the escape. I'm in Kentucky at this point, and they use the exact same pre-sentence report that has that drug use in there. The judge reads about the drug use, and the judge is like, Mr. Johnson? And I don't know why he said it, but he's like, Mr. Johnson, it looks like you were a pretty good citizen before you got involved with all these drugs. And I'm like, yes, Your Honor. So he orders the drug program for me. And that's the best thing that has probably ever happened to me. Turns out that the drug program in federal prison, it's not about drug rehabilitation. It's this CBT thing, this cognitive behavioral therapy. It teaches you that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. If you change the thought process at the top of the chain, your actions change at the end of it. Now, here's the thing. That only works if you choose to have it work, all right? I got out of prison. I did not choose to have that work. I got out in 2011, and I had no taste of breaking the law whatsoever. I did not want to do that. It took me 2.5 years behind the fence. My sister had disowned me. She came back in my life after I escaped and got caught. But it took me 2.5 years behind the fence for me to accept that responsibility, for me to understand that, hey, Johnson, the feds didn't put you in prison. Nobody put you in prison but you. Your actions, your choices did that. And when you accept responsibility, when you understand that wherever you are in your life is because of the choices that you have made, if you really accept that, you have no choice but to instigate change at that point. All right, so I got out of federal prison 2011. Now, when I got out, the truth of the matter is that prison is not there to rehabilitate you. Now, I had that 9-month CBT course, and today I absolutely am a believer in that. I did not choose to exercise that when I got out, all right? I did not want to commit crime, and I didn't. But I could not get a job because I was not allowed to touch a computer. I had job offers from Deloitte, from KnowBe4, from a couple of payment processors. No, you can't take that. Got to where I was trying to apply for fast food. No, those cash registers are computers. You can't do that. Okay, what about a waiter's position? No, that's credit cards and computers, you idiot. So I was bumming money from my dad and my sister. I was on food stamps so I could eat. I had a roommate that was taking care of half the rent, and I was absolutely going broke and going nowhere. And they tell you when you leave prison that if you get a job and something you care about, that you won't go back. Well, I couldn't get a job, and what I had that I cared about, I had a cat, and I got to the point that I had the money to feed my cat, and I didn't have the money to buy toilet paper, and still had a lot of cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So I went to the dollar store, bought the cat some food, and ended up shoplifting toilet paper. Is the first crime I committed. And about the same time, my wife now, Michelle, she ended up finding me. So I got all these turnarounds that culminate in what you asked about,
Sure.
How did I turn things around? The first was that my sister disowning me. The second was Michelle coming into my life and showing me what a healthy relationship was. All right, and she had to have seen that I was going broke. She had to, and she knew I was a criminal. She just didn't think I was breaking the law. I lied to her about that, and she offers to let me move in with her, and I take her up on that because I don't have any place else to go, and I love her as well, but mainly because I don't have any place else to go.
Sure.
And I finally get a job. The only job I could get. My probation officer had allowed me a cell phone, and I got on Craigslist. I was looking for work. Got on Craigslist, and this guy was advertising for lawn care, landscaping. And I was like, well, shit, call him up because I couldn't find anything else. So I called him up, and he's like, yeah, come on down and talk to me. I was in Crestview, Florida, drove down to Destin, Florida, is where he had his business. He was operating the business. Him and his brother were operating out of his house. And his name was Dustin DeRamus. And sat there talking to him about 20 minutes. Finally, Dustin looks at me. He's like, can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah, man. He's like, are you on the run or something? And I was like, no, why? And he was like, you just don't look like the type of guy that would do this kind of work. So I told the guy, told him everything. And he looks at me. He's like, man, he said, I don't know. I'll have to think about this. So I went on home. That was a Friday evening. Sunday evening, he calls me, and he was like, Brett, if I hire you, are you actually going to work? And I was like, Dustin, if you'll just give me a job, man, I'll work my ass off. And he's like, show up tomorrow morning, like 6 o'clock. Next morning, I show up, and my job was pushing a lawnmower 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and paid $400 a week. And I busted my ass. You can probably tell I am not the manual labor guy. Even when I escaped, I didn't really run. I just kind of walked quickly. But busted my ass. I'd hit that lawnmower every day. I'd come home of a night, pass out, be too tired to eat or shower or anything else. I'd wake up the next morning, take a shower, hit it again. But I was doing something,
Sure.
And that brought value.
Yeah.
But just to finish what you were asking. That job ends. It got cold, grass wouldn't grow. I go back to committing crime. I get caught. At my sentencing, the only people at my sentencing was Michelle. She stands up. I'm crying at that point. She stands up, tells the judge I'm a good man. My probation officer, he stands up. We think he's a good guy. We think it's a one-time thing. Prosecutor agrees. Judge gives me a year. My probation officer stands up and he's like, Your Honor, if you can give Mr. Johnson a year and a day, he can get the good time, and he can get back to his family. And the judge amends the sentence to that. I go back and serve 10 months, get out, and when I'm serving that time, that's when I realized that Michelle didn't need me for the things I could give her. She just wanted me for me. And I hadn't had that before. So I get out. We get married shortly after I get out. I ended up reaching out to the FBI, a guy named Kathmandu. And that agent, the reason I knew him, he had arrested a lot of people that I knew. And I sent him a message saying, hey, nothing but respect for you. I'd like to be legal. Dude responds within 2 hours, takes me in under his wing, gives me references, advice. All those things together, and then understanding the harm that I'd caused and accepting that I was the person who put me in that damn position is what caused me to turn my life, to make that choice to turn my life around. Now, at the same time, you got to realize that even with me choosing to do that, if I didn't have people that gave me the chance to do it, like the cybersecurity industry, those people, they were open-armed. they did not. They didn't. They gave me every single chance they could for me to do the right thing. A lot of them put their careers on the line, not knowing if I'd go back to commit crime or not. So I had those people that do that. I had this woman named Carice Hendrick that gave me my first speaking job. That introduced me to Microsoft, who then hired me at that point in time. They all put their careers on the line. They all gave me this opportunity to do the right damn thing. If I didn't have that, chances are I'd have my ass back in prison for 20 years. Sure. So all that together is what happened.
Okay. I know one of the persons that you've talked about in the past is I think there was a lady at your school that was really like your first good person that was sort of in your life, right? Yeah. Do you want to talk about her a little bit? Yeah,
it's I was junior in high school, and geez, man, how much time do we have?
Got time.
Okay, so I had mentioned the abuse. As a child, the way it first started to manifest itself in my life, my parents would leave, and I would urinate in the floor. I made fun of that on Lex Friedman. We talked about Big Lebowski, but I would piss the carpet, and I didn't talk about that until I was in my 40s. And I was on a stage giving a cybersecurity presentation, and I just ran with it, mentioned that. And this lady comes up to me afterwards, and she tells me that before she got involved in fraud, countering fraud, that she used to work with abused children. And that was common, because that was one of the only ways that child had to control their lives. At least they could control their bodily functions. So that's where it first manifests. The next way it manifests, I was 15. My mom had left my dad. My dad was in Florida. I'd said at the top of this recording that my sister always thought that someone was going to come and save us, and I always knew that no one was. Kind of a lie. At that point in time, I thought that I was going to be able to go and live with my father. So I called him one Sunday, and he tells me that's not going to happen, that he's actually gotten married, and that I'm going to have to stay in Kentucky. And what ends up happening, we were Eastern Kentucky. We were living in this neighborhood. I told you we were in these apartments underneath of my grandfather's house. In the neighborhood, at the far edges of the neighborhood, was a hospital. And, we were poor kids. We used to, me and my cousins, my sister, and everyone, we used to go and hop the elevators and ride them between floors and all that. Throw the emergency stops and all that stuff. Hit the alarms, all that. And that day after I talked to my dad, I went to the hospital and was in the elevator. This woman got in the elevator that looked a lot like my mom, and I ended up assaulting her, not sexually assaulting. I physically just beating the woman. And
the moment you saw her, that right away.
Yeah. And people in the neighborhood knew who I was, so I was identified immediately. And the Kentucky State Police, they come down, they pick me up, and I spent like 6 months. I was 15. They didn't have a juvenile institution at that point in time, so I spent 6 months in solitary at the county jail. Pled guilty. The judge orders a psychological evaluation for me. I go to Louisville, Kentucky for that. The woman, she was okay. Mm-hmm. Beat her with hands. And I don't know what to say about that. It's
Did you have instant remorse like right after that? You know, do you know why that was? Like why?
Well, I mean, I know now why. You know, when you're 15, you don't know.
Right.
You know, when you're 15, you don't know what the hell's going on, and it's something that I regret to this day. I truly do. At that point in time, you have to remember that you have to know that Kentucky is one of these small areas that everyone knows what the hell happened.
Right.
So I was in a different county. We moved at my junior year in high school. We moved back to the county where that happened. Very small place. They had 3 high schools. The first high school that I went to was called MC Napier. First day of school, my mom takes me and my sister there to enroll us in school. The kids at the school blocked me from entering, and we left. The second school was the Hazard City schools. We went in there, and the principal told my mom that my sister was allowed, and I was not. And my mom is a hellraiser. She was ready to go to the mat and raise hell and sue and everything else. And I told her, I was like, Mom, I said, please don't do that. I said, there was this other high school at the far edges of the county. And I was like, just take me there. So she took me there. And they let me in immediately. You know, they didn't. They knew who I was. I didn't realize that.
Right.
Everybody knew who I was. I was I was naive. I didn't realize they knew that. So, I was 16 at that point in time, and I did not. I was a naive criminal. You know, didn't realize people knew who I was and all this stuff, but. They accepted me in there, and I walked into the homeroom, and this woman named Carol Combs, she was a homeroom teacher. She was also the English teacher. So I hand her my paper, and the way she describes it today is she heard this voice, and she stops for a second. She looks up at me. She's like, son, have you ever done theater before? And I was like, no, ma'am, I'm not interested in acting. I am interested in your quick recall academic team, though. And she's like, no, son, acting. I was like, no, man. Well, it turns out that she was the drama teacher and also the academic team coach. So the deal was that if I did theater, that I could do academics as well. So my first foray into acting was Edward Albee's The Sandbox. And the way I got that role, the person who was playing the grandmother got sick, or so got mono or some crap like that. And she looks at me, and it was like the performance was at the community college like 4 days later. And she was like, you're the grandmother. And I was like, I'm the grandmother. And she's like, yeah, you're the grandmother. And the play it's a one-act play. The family takes this grandmother to the beach to die, is what it's about. So it's a very serious play. And I did not do that because they're supposed to carry the grandmother in. I'm a big guy. So I ended up carrying them in. You know, they ended up carrying them in, plopped my ass down there, did not know the lines. So halfway through the show, I pull out the script and I'm reading from that. But it went over pretty well. So what happens is ultimately I ended up at the Kentucky High School Speech League in my senior year. We were doing a show called The Good Doctor by Neil Simon. It's a multi-character show. And it would never happen today. Wouldn't happen at all. But at the awards ceremony, the guy stands up and he was like, look, we didn't have any really good female actors this year. So what we're going to do is Brett Johnson wins Best Actor and Actress for the year. So that was 1989. I won Best Actor and Best Actress, and that's how that happened. At the same time, I became this. I'm a really bright guy. I became this kind of force to be reckoned with in academics, and I attribute that to Carol Combs. She was the first decent person that I'd ever met, and she became this almost surrogate mother to me. I was doing theater and academics, and the way the high school is, you walk down off the hill, and there was this convenience store there, and after school and practice, I would go down there and I would just sit and wait for my mom to come and get me, because my mom wouldn't come and get me until like 7 o'clock at night most times, because she was out with my stepdad and stuff like that. So I would be down there 2 to 3 hours just waiting for that. So Carol, over the course of a couple of months, she would come down after she got through her school and everything. She would come down and she would gas up or get some drinks or what have you at the convenience store, and she would always see me there. And one day she looks at me, she's like, "Brett, why are you here every day?" And I told her. So she starts driving me home every day, so I don't have to wait all damn day at the place. And she became this kind of mother to me. And while I was under her tutelage, I was an outstanding citizen. And as soon as high school ended, that all fell apart again. Ultimately, I had I won those awards in high school for acting. I'm very good on stage, very good. Okay. And I had this scholarship. This guy flies in. I was at the community college, and a guy named Edward Emanuel. He was the theater head over at San Jose State. We were doing a show of his called A House Divided, a Civil War show. So the theater director at the community college knew Ed and flew him in to see the show. And Ed offers me a scholarship after he sees that. And I'm like, he's like, you're a big fish in a small pond. You can be a big fish in a big pond. I was like, yeah, we'll do that. It's a full boat ride. And I told him I'd take it. So he goes home, flies back in a couple weeks later. And I was out shooting basketball. He drives up. And I go over to the car. I was like, I'll take you and introduce you to my mom. He's like, no, I got it. So he walks in, and he's in there about 15 minutes. Comes back out white as a sheet, doesn't say a word to me, gets in the car, leaves. And it took me a couple weeks to find out what had happened. My mom had pulled a knife on the guy and said, "You're not going to steal my son from me," and threatens to kill him. And I've been asked, even I was on Jordan Peterson. Peterson pointed out, you could have taken it anyway. Yeah, I could have, but kind of broke my spirit at that point in time, and I just dove right into fraud and crime and all that. I was the guy, it's not just, I mentioned that shoplifting, but it was everyone on that side of the family. I mean, we were all involved in some bullshit. Government benefits fraud, charity fraud, insurance fraud, illegally strip mining coal, all that.
Yeah, take us to that real quick, Brett, if you could.
I've got people that have commented on that. I think it was Friedman. I said it was a 36-inch block of coal. It's 36 by 36 by 36. That's a ton of. It's actually 39 inches. It's a meter by meter. That's a ton of coal. All right. The way illegally strip mining works, back then, you had to get, if you were a small operator, you had to get a 2-acre permit. So you'd pay the state, I think it's like $5,000 an acre, something like that. You'd pay the state, they'd issue a permit so you could extract the coal on that 2 acres. And then they issued the permit so that you would reclaim the land. So you had, you may have to have a silt pond, something like that. The problem with that's a lot of money, not just for the permit, but also reclamation. Most people don't have that. So what you'd have this thing called wildcatting, where people would not get the permit to mine the coal. They would just go out there and get it. So you'd pay the landowner, rights for the land and the minerals. You'd pay that off at, 25 cents a ton or what have you. And then you'd have to go to a coal tipple, and you're in Kentucky. It's not difficult. You go to a coal tipple and say, hey, I've got a pit of coal. It's estimated this many tons. Will you buy that? Then they'd say, well, what BTU is it? And you'd go in there, you'd have to take a sample of that, and you'd have that tested to see what the BTU is. You'd take that back to the tipple and say, okay, how much per ton are you going to give? And they'd say, well, $37 a ton. All right, so then you contact the coal truck drivers, and you arrange to have it extracted. So you got the loader, you got the dozer and everything else. And then one night, you go and you load up everything, because it turns out most of it's going to be done at night, so that the mine inspectors are not finding out about that bullshit. And that's typically what you're talking about, illegally strip mining coal. It's not some nefarious act. You're just not getting the permits to do it, and you're not reclaiming the land at the end of the day, because your ass can't afford to do that.
Yeah, and there's varieties of things that you did, and I thought that was one of the interesting ones, because I think Lex pointed out about like how much you knew about that, like the technicality behind that. Just being in that space at that age, you knew so much about that, right?
Yeah, well, you learn all that stuff, and I'm big about soaking up stuff. So I always thought it was really interesting that for that type of coal, whatever you're mining out, that it's 39 inches by 30. I said 36, but 39 by 39 by 39 is a ton of coal. Yeah. That's pretty neat to know that.
Yeah.
So if you know that, you can figure out the depth of the seam and how big that seam is, and you know how many tons you're getting out. So when you go to the tipple, you're just like, hey, I've got this many tons, $37 a ton. This is a check I'm expecting.
Yeah, but also like you were in that environment where you were sort of like passed on that information. It also came from people that were around you, right? So you also knew about that.
It's like insurance fraud. I mean, you learn as you go, and you're soaking that up. Like we would fake car accidents, fake stolen cars, bullshit like that. My mom, Jesus Christ, that woman. I've not spoken to her in a while, but. The floods were 2 years ago. She's in her 70s. She set a house on fire in her 70s to get the insurance money. This is the life that I grew up in. Was that
Okay. There was one again on the topic of like this, the interesting ways to make money, I guess, right? Another one, the other one that I thought was unique one was there was one. It was like a circuit board of some sort that was transmitting like channels or something out in Canada. And then can you take us through that a little bit? Because when you start going into like the soldering of like the chipsets and whatnot and the resistors, and I'm like, man, I mean, this guy knows it all. So can you?
So what? And this leads into Shadow Crew and that need for a fake driver's license and all that. So I did the Beanie Baby thing. Then the baseball thing, and then there was the Microsoft front page fiasco. I did that as well. That all leads into I start to sell pirated software, pirated Adobe, Microsoft, and then video games. Well, to play the video games, you had to install a mod chip on the gaming console, whether that be the Sega Saturn or the I say Sega Saturn, PlayStation or Dreamcast had a mod chip as well, all right? But it was mostly PlayStation. So I started to install mod chips, first into PlayStation systems. $30 a pop, you'd order the mod chips out of Hong Kong, get them in like a tube where you'd break the little mod chip off and solder it on the circuit board. So I started to do that. That led into installing mod chips on cable television boxes that would turn on all the pay-per-view channels. Started doing that. So then later, that led into programming satellite DSS cards. Those 18-inch RCA satellite systems, you can pull the access card out of it, turn on all the channels. Started doing that. So at the same time I started doing that, almost exactly the same time, this Canadian judge rules that it's legal for Canadian citizens to pirate those signals. Dipshit actually said it in court that since RCA doesn't sell the systems up here, my citizens can pirate the signals. So what happens is, overnight, they're not selling them in Canada. So overnight down in the United States, you go down to Best Buy, you buy the system for $100, you take it out of the parking lot, open the box up, pull the system out, pull the card out, throw the system away, program the card, ship it to Canada, $500 a pop. Started doing that, making a lot of money. Had so many orders, could not fill them all, and at the same time, RCA started to loop the cards, so they would start to kill the cards out. So it became this game of trying to find the proper cards to program to ship to Canada. Couldn't do it. So I realized pretty quickly, but they're in Canada. I'm down here. Who are they going to complain to? It's illegal. Now, at the same time that shit's going on, Elon Musk has opened up PayPal. So PayPal just gets started. They had no clue about fraud, illegal payments coming in, ripping people off on scams, anything else. So, and people trusted PayPal for some damn reason immediately out of the gate. So what I would do is I would advertise on eBay the access cards, or on it wasn't Craigslist back then. It was Classifieds 2000. So I would advertise on Classifieds 2000 about these access cards for sale, and people would come out of the woodwork to buy them at $500 a pop. They would send the money through PayPal, so on a daily basis you'd get a few $1,000s to that. Now I don't have the cards, so what? Who are they going to complain to? They would complain to PayPal. PayPal would shut down the account, but the way PayPal worked at that point in time, PayPal would close the account, and then they would cut you a check for whatever dollar amount was in the account and send to you. Holy shit, are you serious? So that's why I needed a fake driver's license. I'm getting these checks in for $4,000, $8,000 at a pop. I'm having to deposit them in my name. I'm getting worried about how much is coming in. Someone's going to look at me and get my ass arrested because I'm ripping these people off. All right? So I get online, looking around for a driver's license, can't find one, get ripped off, and then ultimately Shadow Crew comes out of that.
Okay. So I want to move a little bit more into like the current world situations with, I know you mentioned one particular application, Telegram, which is very interesting. And then I believe like sometime like last year, the head of Telegram got arrested, I believe in France, I think.
Yeah.
So can you talk briefly about like the mechanics of what Telegram is and how it's different and what possibly could be behind the arrest, and can you from your side, yeah.
So first of all, there's a misconception. So Telegram's a great application. It truly is. I mean, it's nice. All right. It allows you to communicate with each other, call each other through that platform. You can post videos. You can send direct messages. You can advertise things. I mean, it's almost a one and all platform. All right. There's a misconception that Telegram is encrypted end to end. It is not. What is encrypted end to end is if you choose to send direct messages that are secret direct messages out of the gate to each other. That's the only thing that's encrypted end to end. And there's some question as to whether that even is, or the Telegram people actually have the keys to those conversations as well.
So let me just stop you right there. So compared to like, let's say you have apps like WhatsApp and Facebook messengers, and you're talking about like, I'm from Nepal originally, and Viber is pretty big in Nepal, which is owned by Rakuten. So, and they talk about it is end-to-end encrypted. Is that like within quotes, end-to-end encrypted?
It boils down to, do you trust them not to have the keys to the conversation? Do you trust Mark Zuckerberg not to have?
That's a great question. I'm just going to answer it like this. That's a great question, Brad.
Right. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
All right, it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, Telegram's no different. Do you trust Pavel Durov and the Russian government not to have the keys to decrypt those messages? Now, we know they have the keys to decrypt everything except those private and supposedly messages there. We know that. We know that for a fact, all right? But do they have the keys to the other, and do you trust them not to do that? That's the question. Okay,
Yeah.
a lot of criminals, when new technology comes out, like for example Bitcoin. Okay, when Bitcoin comes out, criminals flocked to it because the first adoptees to a technology that if you can use to remain anonymous or to launder money, first adoptees tend to be criminals. Okay. So Bitcoin comes out, and there was a misconception that Bitcoin is anonymous when it first came. No, by God, it's not.
That's the entire premise of this, is right?
Exactly. It's a public ledger. It's not anonymous at all. Now, Monero, yeah, if you use that properly, it's anonymous, okay? Bitcoin's not. But the initial perception of Bitcoin was that it was. So you had criminals. You had Ross Ulbricht that uses it on the Silk Road, and it gives it its use case, all right? So Telegram's no different. Telegram's the perception of Telegram initially was it's encrypted end to end. Now the problem is that without Telegram, you've got Tor, the onion router, the traditional dark web that's out there. That's not an easy thing to use. There's a lot of what's called friction. So for people who don't know what friction is anything that interferes with the user experience on a platform. Okay, that's what's called friction. Tor, the dark web, has a lot of friction. You have to download a program. You have to configure it properly. You have to make sure it's not turned on where Java's on and all this other crap.
And that was actually started by the U.S. Navy, right?
That's another point of friction.
A lot of people actually didn't know about that.
Right.
Okay.
So the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy is the one that creates the onion router, Tor.
Yeah.
And they do that so that intelligence operatives can communicate with each other without being identified. Right. Bravo. They then decide it's going to go open source so that whistleblowers can use it without being identified, or that people can get around countries' firewalls. All right, that's a noble thing to think of. Except they forget that the first adoptees to tech for anonymity are criminals, and that's who flocks to it initially are those criminals. Okay, and that's where this term dark web comes from, is the criminal environment that's part of that. So you have to download it. You have to get past that idea that the government has helped create it. You have to know where you're going because there's no search engine for Tor. Not only that, but you've got a lot of criminals that use that. So if you're going to a criminal marketplace, you have to make sure it's the real marketplace because there's a lot of phishing websites that are out there that mimic those types of websites. There's people that are looking to rip you off. So all those things together, it's not encrypted, all those things together create a lot of friction. Telegram doesn't have that. Telegram's an app that you can download on your phone. You can run it in a browser. Supposedly, it's encrypted end to end. We know up until Pavel was arrested, we know that the Russians did not answer any, and I mean any, subpoena request. So that you're wondering why he's arrested. He's arrested because he's not sharing anything. You know, I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of FBI. And they were adamant, and they were correct, that unless a criminal is sharing something that can be, OSINT on Telegram, you're not going to be able to identify who that is because Telegram's not giving any of that device information, IP information, none of that away. So, of course, Pavel is going to get his ass picked up over in France.
Okay.
But I also understand that. So you got TikTok.
Yeah.
So you know, all these cybersecurity people, they can scream as much as they want to about it being a national security concern. That is not what got TikTok shut down. What got TikTok shut down was that TikTok was drinking the milkshakes of every American social media company that was out there. They were stealing all their members. Mark Zuckerberg and company got really upset about that, started to complain to Congress, and then the national security concerns popped up at that point. That's what happened. Same thing with Telegram. Telegram is an outstanding app. It is truly outstanding. You know, anybody that actually uses that, you can understand the value of that almost immediately once you sign on to it. So because of that, what's better than to arrest the guy who runs it, cause that type of static. Now, granted, it's a criminal platform. I mean, not a criminal platform, but criminals flock to it because of the ease of use, because of the greatness of the platform. But it's not just criminal activity that's on there. But at the same time, governments want to know who's using it, who's talking about it, things like that as well.
Sure. Okay. Well, we dive right into like the next topic that I was going to talk about, Bitcoin, and you're already laughing. All right. So, what's your overall take on cryptocurrency, and are you buying any Dogecoins right now?
So I had up until last year, 24, the only business I did with crypto was with companies that wanted something bought, or law enforcement that was looking to buy illegal goods and services, and I would use crypto for that. And the reason for that, I viewed crypto as a trigger, all right, because of the criminal origins of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency at large. If you look at Bitcoin, there are two main precursors, and that's eGold and Liberty Reserve. eGold and Liberty Reserve were criminal tokens. Both of those owners get indicted. As a matter of fact, one of the founders of Liberty Reserve is still on the United States Most Wanted list today. They don't know where his ass is. All right? So both of those were used to facilitate criminal activity. If you listen to someone like Peter Thiel, or Theo, however you say his name, he believes that whoever Satoshi Nakamoto was an advocate of one of those tokens, and learned the lesson of, hey, you don't come out and say who you are when you come out with this token. That's why Satoshi is anonymous to this day. The first real use case, and people will argue with me about this, well, someone bought pizza. Yeah, granted, someone bought pizza. And yes, it's peer-to-peer, so you can transfer back. Yeah, I get that. But the first mass use case for Bitcoin was Silk Road. That's what really gives it its value. That's why people want Ross Ulbricht out of prison today, is because of that. He made a lot of people rich, all right? If you understand, and for me, because of those criminal origins, I did not want to have anything personally to do with the crypto sphere, all right? This last year, I changed my mind. And I did all right. I lost my ass a lot of the time, too. I absolutely did. But I made more money than not. Right now, I am not in crypto. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm adamant about, especially where we're in a bull run right now. To me, a bull run is you get a lot of new blood coming in that does not understand the environment at all. And what you have to understand about cryptocurrency is that it's a zero-sum game. You profit because of someone else losing. If I'm buying a token, what's going to cause me profit is someone buying at a higher dollar value than I am. And at that point, I'm going to cash out. And understand at the same time, the language has changed. When Bitcoin comes out, people were talking, and you still have the cult members that are talking about, well, it's going to replace currency. It's going to replace fiat. That's going to be how we exchange things in the future. That's changed. It's changed from that currency to, well, it's an investment vehicle now. All right? So you're not worried about it being a currency to trade. You're worried about someone holding it like a stock or a share, is the language now. But it's even changed from that point. It was initially talking about the technology. The technology is what matters. That's what gives it its value. People don't talk about technology anymore. They don't talk about utility anymore. These days, this bull run, what's driving it? Cartoon characters, memes, the Trump Melania token.
Which came out this week or just yesterday, or whatever it was?
The dude comes out Friday, right? He announces the Trump token, I think like at 10:30 at night. Within an hour, it's $1 billion market cap. $1 billion.
I think it's like 13 billion now.
Yeah. Before I came in here, it was at 10.
10? Okay.
10.9. That's what it was. Yeah. Now, Melania, Jesus. So last night, I think at 7 p.m., Trump shares that the Melania token has launched. Now, it goes to a $10 billion market cap. This morning, it's at 1.9. So it's already dumped.
Right.
Now you're talking about something that has no value at all. At all. You're also talking about something that you're able to
Yeah, and in that space, Brett, I mean, that's where this question comes through, right? I mean, I was reading up this thing where they're talking about, so, I guess like there's some sort of legislation or something. So when you launch a coin of some sort, right,
Sure.
you're supposed to describe what that is, right?
Right.
And you're talking about like all these, after like Bitcoin and you had like Ethereum and all these coins. There's people are just, it became a joke. Dogecoin was a joke. It started as a joke.
And then it got serious.
Right. And then it got serious. And then they also literally, people were like just putting up like all these different coins. And then someone put up a coin that was called Scam Coin.
Yeah.
It literally was called Scam Coin. And they described that 99.9% of this is scam.
Right.
And like the others, still people bought into that.
Absolutely.
Which is outrageous if you really think about it.
just on the Solana chain right now, you've got over 30,000 new coins a day.
Yeah.
A day. Think about that.
Yeah.
And you've got this thing called Pump Fund, where now you can create a token. They used to charge you $2.
Yeah.
Now it's free.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yeah.
So and if you look at and the same thing is true of the Trump token and the Melania token. You look at the launch of those tokens. You've got the candles the exact same size that first couple of hours of the launch. What causes that? That's not human.
Yeah.
That's bots interacting and manipulating that token to make that traffic look like that. Over 90% of all the traffic across the cryptocurrency industry is manipulated. It's fake traffic.
Yeah.
Fake traffic.
Yeah.
And why is it there? Because the perception of truth is more important than the truth itself.
Correct.
If I can convince you that traffic is there, it will bring human buyers in.
Yeah.
And those human buyers are the exit liquidity that I need in order to profit on that token.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Yeah. So I think the idea of cryptocurrency is a noble idea. I do. But the actual practice of it is anything but.
Yeah.
And now you've got a president, and I supported Trump coming in because I didn't like Biden. Mm-hmm. All right? But you've got a president that is launching these tokens that is, I don't see any way other to say it, but it's absolutely criminal.
Yeah.
It's absolutely criminal. So are you okay with a president that is launching a token saying that he's protecting the American citizen, but at the same time is victimizing that American citizen, using them as exit liquidity so he can become this billionaire when people can't afford to buy eggs at $7 in Alabama, it's $7 a dozen. I don't know what it is in California, 15, whatever the hell.
Yeah, I don't think we can even find eggs like right now. They have
Yeah.
issues. But anyways, besides the point.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
People can't afford to live, yet you've got this going on at the same time.
Yeah. No, it's pretty insane, like the amount of coins that are out there, and you just have to. It also begs to to be looked into. If you really think of going back to like how FTX crashed, right? What really boggles my mind is, okay, like see, for an average person like me or whoever, you may not know too much about it, and the hype, the FOMO is always going to be there. You want to put some money towards it. All right, that's fine. But for companies like the big companies like BlackRock, and if they're not assessing like how these big exchanges or like these companies are being ran, I mean, I just find it fascinating that
it's crazy.
It's not being looked at.
No, it's not going to be. I mean, we know the administration coming in. He's adamant about making sure that the SEC does less regulations and less investigations into crypto. He's already said that. So you've got that type of environment where fraud is going to be condoned, facilitated, accepted, not investigated, no negative consequences whatsoever. What happens with that environment at the end of the day? So, right. And that's why I'm not in crypto right now. I'm not putting any money into it. I'm adamant about daily talking about warning people, hey, be aware of this environment. You are going to lose your ass in this environment.
So what you're saying is I should not sell my house and put it towards everything towards Dogecoin.
I would not put a penny in that.
All right, gotcha. All right. Another one I wanted to just have your take is how does AI complicate the cybersecurity of the world, right? We have these processors that can process so many things, so many bits at the same time now,
sure.
right? Does that complicate our cybersecurity in some regards?
So Friedman had Lex Friedman had an AI guy on a few weeks ago, and one of the founders. I forgot the guy's name, but what he was talking about is how it's going to benefit the bad guys more than the good guys sometime in late 2025. And I think he's right on that. I've been adamant for the past year and a half of saying that, hey, the bad guys right now, they're not using AI because it's not very effective. The techniques that have been successful are still largely successful. It's being used to a degree, but not what the good guys trying to sell their security services are saying. How does it complicate things? I think it complicates things because, first of all, it's not really AI yet. All right, so we're jumping the gun, calling large language models actual AI. That's not really the case yet. Now, that being said, what we're seeing with these large language models, we're seeing that they are already able to do 60% of the job of most fraud people that are out there. Most cybersecurity people, those large language models are absolutely able to successfully do 60% of the job. All right. I think that if you look at like a rules-based system, machine learning systems, that type of stuff, if you look at that, what typically happens is an attacker will figure out where that bar is, especially on a rules-based system or a machine learning system. So you figure out where that bar is, and you come in right in under that. All right. Now, what will happen is the good guys at that point, they'll adjust the bar. It becomes this, tit for tat, reaction, proaction type thing. I think in some aspects that AI, as it continues to develop and grow, I think it absolutely becomes very effective in those statistics that I gave out earlier, that 90% plus of every attack uses known exploits. I think it becomes very effective in figuring out what that landscape is on those exploits and plugging that, all right? Mm. I also think it becomes very effective from an attacker point of view of scanning that landscape and trying to innovate on that, all right? Chaining those attacks together like we see with NotPetya, chaining those exploits together. I think it becomes very effective in that, or anticipating what a new exploit would look like. I think it becomes effective in that. My concern, you look at deep fakes, for example. All right, so right now, the deep fake game, you've got the security company that has their algorithm. You've got an attacker that launches a deep fake. The security company may or may not be able to recognize that. If they're not able to recognize that, they'll tweak their algorithm to then identify that specific deep fake. At that point, the attacker then goes, tweaks theirs, back and forth, back and forth. It will get to the point that AI becomes so effective on the attack side that the security companies will not be able to identify what that it is a deep fake in time to do anything. I think and at that point, I think we're looking at a really serious problem with how are we able to believe any single thing that we see or hear at that point. Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah. One example I can already tell you is, Instagram actually has currently, we'll give you an example, Instagram has this verification, like the blue tick, right? What that really correlates to or like translates to is, if you are an individual, you're supposed to present your driver's license, or if you're a business, and,
right.
You have to provide some sort of credentials. I think I saw something like there was a profile, which I'm 100% positive this is not a real person, right?
Right.
It's already verified. So that kind of tells me maybe like the systems is already sort of like filtering through that. Right. It's not up to, like the technology not up to like what's happening out on the AI space, right? So that's going to be interesting. The other one, quantum computing. So we had some stocks. There's a few ones that, obviously stock market is not really usually rational in these things. And the talk was, okay, they're going to be the next big thing. There always is.
Sure.
You had the AIs and you have like the other stuff as well. So I guess Jensen Huang from Nvidia and I guess Elon Musk. They talked about them. They're not really there yet. That's what they said, right? And that tanked the stock, obviously, those stocks. Have you looked into that? Like, is that?
I have not.
You have not. Okay.
I mean, I'm a firm believer that we're absolutely on an AI bubble. That's going to pop.
Sure.
Absolutely. And then we're also on a crypto bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got Bitcoin over the past 3 years has increased 625%.
It has. I mean, I think I was looking at this. So when you were on Lex, I think you were talking about how you should have bought that years ago.
Yeah.
And I think when you were on Lex, it was at 16 or 18 or 20. It's at I think
109 today.
Oh man! All right. Well, you keep on saying it, and next time I'll see you, it might be $1 million. Brett, never know, right?
Someone wants to donate anything.
Okay, so Brett, I told you my background actually is electrical engineering, and I work in the utility space a little bit, right?
Sure.
So one of the talks, in our industry, I know cybersecurity has been one of the major hot topics. We talk about it. We get trained on it. We have these, different tests that you have to take in different courses. Just to,
Sure.
You're talking about how you have to have these situational awareness and things like that. Electric grid. If something happens to the electric grid, right? I believe just here in Tennessee or wherever it was a few years back,
right.
someone attacked a substation and then with bullets, right? Someone shot at that, and then that was down for a little bit. So on the cyber security side of things on the electrical grid, have you looked into any of that? How careful do we have to be? And
So I gave I forgot the name of the company, but this is we were at Putin Bay, Ohio. I don't know if you've been up there or not. It's a little island out in the lake there. Great place. There was an infrastructure convention there, and I got to talk to the water guys, electric guys, all that. The water guys not horribly worried. I asked them. I was like, "So what happens if someone gets you?" And they're like, "Well, really, the only thing we need to do is go over there and we twist this thing and it turns the water on." I'm like, "Okay, so not bad." The electric guys, absolutely worried about that. Scared to death of that as a whole. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you, but the electric guys are absolutely worried about that. The water guys are not.
Yeah.
The thing, we did this test of dropping thumb drives in parking lots, all right? Wondering if someone would pick it up. And the answer is yeah. And then you continue on with the test of, will someone plug it in at work? And the answer is yeah. And then if there's any file on there that mentions salary at all, someone's going to open it. So, I mean, I was arguing with the guy on the way up here. I was arguing with the guy, and he was saying how education is the most important thing. Okay, that's nice in theory, but we already know that education doesn't work unless it's persistent and ongoing. It works as long as the education is there. Once that phishing simulation campaign ends, those numbers go right back to where they were, and that's the exact same way it is across the board. You're talking about AI. I think that AI can help with that. Instead not the education, but monitoring and keeping track of the phishing attacks, anything else that's going on in that type of environment. I think AI can do that and do that pretty effectively. Yeah. With the electric grid, the thing is that I have a concern that we have still not drawn the lines, and we're scared to death to do that, as to what institutes a nation-state attack against our infrastructure. Certainly we ping everyone else, and they ping us at the same time. But there has to be some sort of lines drawn as to what's acceptable and what's not, and then what the consequences are to that. And I think that we as a country have not been willing to set those lines yet.
Yeah. No, that same thing, like the thumb drive. They I believe out in Iran, like all those years ago, when that nuclear station got hacked, it
Yeah.
was actually through that
It
the
was.
same exact mechanism, right?
yeah.
So it.
Drop it in the parking lot. See if
It's all about, like, I mean, not everyone is aware of like what's happening around you, right? And then
Right.
you see a flash drive, and there's people are inclined to kind of do that. So okay, Brett. I mean, before I forget, I actually spaced out on this. So for people who may not know this, there's a series, or there's actually there's I would call it like documentary on Netflix called The Biggest Heist Ever, and we do have Brett on there. And it was, again, fascinating. I actually like looked at that entire thing about like the Bitcoin
Right.
situation. It actually talks a lot about that. So if anyone has a chance to has some time, definitely that's something that you want to definitely look into. And do you want to talk a little bit about that real quick?
Sure. So, geez, it's the cybercrime world. I mean, there are millions of people, but it's really a very close-knit community. We're very small. I still refer to myself as a criminal. I do. I'm the criminal that chooses not to break the law. But I still have the mindset, the temptations, things like that. What happened is when I was working with the Secret Service, ripping them off, we got hacked. About 3 months into the investigation, we got hacked. And for years, I had no idea who did it. The guy terrorized me, compromised some systems, everything else. The Secret Service ends up, they initially deny that it happened. And then some documents come out later on confirming that it happened. And what happens is I set up a guy. So I was working as an informant with the Secret Service. I set up this guy to get him caught and go to prison. His name was John Giannone. And the kid, decent kid. He made some bad choices in his life. But what he does is he fights the case. He ends up getting thousands of FOIA documents. And he reaches out to me. Years later, he reaches out to me. We become friends. And we're talking one day, and he's like, Brett, I know who hacked you while you were working at the Secret Service. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, man, I know. So he sends me the documents over, and it's this guy named Eugene Lichtenstein. And I'm looking at it, I was like, man, I know that Lichtenstein name from somewhere. Well, it turns out that his son, about 3 months earlier, had been arrested for trying to launder like $4.2 billion of the Bitcoin that had been stolen from Bitfinex back in 2016. So it was very fortuitous that that those documents landed on me just at that point in time. If it had been any earlier, I wouldn't have recognized it. No one would have known anything else. But that's what happens. I ended up breaking the news to Forbes and several other news organizations that, hey, Ilya Lichtenstein's dad was this hacker back in the day. Now, ultimately, what happens is Bitfinex ends up screwing over all of the people who had their Bitcoin stolen. I mean, they really did. At the same time, there looks to be some sort of potential FSB involvement from the Russian government in with that Bitfinex heist. That case was declared a matter of national security so that no one will ever know exactly what happened there. Ilya Lichtenstein ends up admitting to the laundering, and he takes responsibility for the actual theft as well during his sentencing phase. Whether that's true or not, I doubt. The way the Bitfinex attack happened was almost a mirror copy of the way Eugene Lichtenstein compromised an Indiana bank back in the mid-2000s. So I doubt very seriously that Ilya was the person who stole the currency. Mm-hmm. Certainly he was the person who tried to launder a lot of it. Why the government chooses to keep that hidden, I don't know. But we'll never know what the answer is. I don't think we will. Okay.
No, I thought it was a great insight into how that world works a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
how the FBI operates, and you get to learn a little bit more about the Bitcoin and the operation. So, you had the FBI officer who had to go to, like, he was sitting in his office.
I talked to that
Did
guy.
you? Okay, yeah.
So what happens is I get these documents.
Yeah.
I work with the FBI. I consult with them all the time.
Yeah.
So I call my guy and I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to. And it was the night before. I was like, look, tomorrow Forbes is coming to film me talking about this. I said, so, the agent, whoever's in charge of Ilya in this case, I need to let them know about this as well. So I get on the phone with him that morning before I'm filming with Forbes, and this guy talks about it on the documentary. He's like, these guys who are armchair investigators. Well, dude, I sent him the friggin' documents, so he knows what's going on.
Okay.
All right. So I talked to him. He's like, well, where did you get these documents? Well, it turns out that FOIA requests that now they're not even available through a FOIA request. So, he had the documents, he saw it, he's aware of what's going on. This BS that he was throwing up of, armchair investigators, he knows what time it is as well.
Understood.
It's all this stuff of just, not allowed to talk about stuff, keeping things hidden. At the same time, you've got an investigator who, he made the arrest. He needs that arrest to stick. He doesn't need any type of chatter coming in from the background that causes people to question what's happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, Brett, I know I know we're coming towards the end of this session here, but one of the things I feel like I read through, like, comments that have for you from people, and one of the things I also was curious from my end is, have you tried to go back to do you know anyone that you have sort of like, had that interaction where you ended up using up their money, or you went through that cycle of frauding them?
Yeah.
Have you been in contact with any of them, or so people are sort of curious in that regard as well?
No, I've not. I'm repaying the monies that I'd stolen. Mm-hmm. It's required. I'm repaying that. I've not been in contact with any of the victims. I did when I think it was Slate that interviewed that Stephen Schwecke guy. Mm. I did want to speak to him at that point in time. He did not want to speak to me. I'd be more than willing to talk to any victims, but
okay.
What would I say?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I did not. I certainly meant to do it when I did it. I regret my actions, and that's all I can say. I'd be more than willing to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to request any FOIA documents on my end for anything like that.
But it takes a lot. So just like Lex also pointed out, I think it takes a lot to come. First of all, a lot of the times people don't even come to the other side. They just never get that chance. Right. And I think in some regard, you're sort of fortunate. You have a lot of supporting people that actually have helped you. But also, it takes a lot from this inner recognition that you have to have, and which you definitely have. And I appreciate you being very honest. And
well, make no mistake. I led a life of no positive activity at all. I don't think that there was one redeeming feature during that entire span of my life. Okay, certainly, a piece of shit is not inappropriate to call me, but I try to make sure that these days that every single day I try to be a better person than I was the day before, and some days I even succeed at that. And I was talking to a guy on the way here. I'd have to stop and text every now and then, but we were talking about everyone has a price. At what point that you would commit a crime or victimize someone, and I chimed in. I was like, okay, if that's true, and if you're serious about leading a legal life, then it becomes most important that you make sure that you are priced out of the market. All right, and we talked back and forth about that. And what I mean by that, it's not just a dollar amount. With me, it's the people, the relationships, the friends and associates that I've got now. It's the people who have looked out for me, who have given me a chance. It's being respected in this industry as a good guy, as for some odd damn reason, I'm almost the moral voice of cybersecurity on a lot of things these days. And it's crazy to think about the guy who was formerly this criminal that's now this moral voice that's out there. But it's also that price has increased because my internal value has increased too.
Sure.
You know, I'm this guy that I absolutely refuse to be the guy who loses and goes back to commit crime. I'm adamant about not being remembered as the guy who stole everything. You know, I want to be, and at the same time, it's like I'm paving the way. And the FBI has said this. I'm paving the way for people who are criminals as well, who want to be in this industry. So it's to do that, I would have to forsake the people who've given me a chance, people who trust me now, who put their careers on the lines in the past, and all these other things. And I you know, could it happen? I won't say that it wouldn't. I don't think you can ever say that I would never go back to commit crime. But the price, every day I try to make sure that price raises a little bit more.
Sure.
I've not committed crime yet, and much like an addict, I think that the longer you go without committing crime, the chances are you'll keep going.
Sure. Okay. All right, Brett. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, you know, good luck with everything.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett.